When I do report, I come to work, we only do that. And this is the other one. Yeah, it'll be exciting to see that. We're going to have a new book. The 12 hours, like, every 12 hours, like, you guys are here, like, you know, rather than, so I thought, okay.
Yes, I do. Oh, you like it?
No, I used it. So our desktop and our laptop were like ancient desktop guys. Laptop ones. So I went to get a new one. I just wanted inexpensive. I wanted the HP because that's what I used to. My husband never wanted that one. He wanted the MacBook because he's so used to the Apple stuff. And I got it all set up, hooked up, and everything, and I used it 6 weeks. I just haven't used it.
It's definitely totally different.
Well, I just haven't needed it, and so that's why I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. I haven't used it, but not very often.
Okay.
It's kind of fun. Just can't take it.
Yeah, my son, he's into this DJ. So he took my laptop, and ball it. I don't make too much of a big deal. I got my iPhone, and I got a MacBook.
Right, you know, I guess I use my iPad.
Yeah.
Someone took it on my iPad and I set it right there on my paper.
Right. Yeah, you like it. Once again,
Eventually,
I have a 27 Mac. I really like it. If I want to read stuff, we're looking at watching.
what kind of watch? Apple Watch? Yeah, I got mine. I got one. I haven't worn it since I've been on private lessons.
Oh, they did pretty good, actually. Dad had to stop Dad halfway because he kept on just putting everything into the pot.
I wanted to watch it.
He's like, no. Noodles go
I
with
had a
it.
deal where they was giving me.
So at least she was there to go, what are you doing?
New SE watches.
Oh, yeah, no, I had all the ingredients out. We just didn't know what order to put them in. I went in down, throw it all in.
2.5 year contract. Been on road anywhere.
We just switched over to Verizon. I actually got my watch from Verizon. It was like $10 a month to sell service. And I have used it, but I'm thinking about, I'm going to see how much I use it after I get back to the regular routine. If not use it that much, I'm just going to cancel the cell service on it. I'm going to keep it and use it, but I don't know if I need the cell service.
You see, when I got, because I had this one here, I got the phone. When I first got the phone, I was like, I don't really need the cell service. Where I go?
How you doing, Lisa? Going well?
That's not good.
Everything going well?
I'm like, people get gas out the way. One time I went to pick up my daughter from the track.
You did on the 7th.
What they sent me.
That's weird.
Those are all the phone numbers of every place that's in
Oh,
Most have been headed for.
So mine has been like
Okay, for now, I'll let you read chapter.
phones in my
Hope you don't have any problems.
like I got my phone's in my purse.
Okay,
My
then.
bag here is that, and I can.
We'll do that.
That, and then a couple of times phones in my purse. And bag, I've been in so many
Hey.
instead of digging it out.
right. I was like, you know, this is I might walk off and go to another
Here's the
deal.
reading.
Get back.
You got a week to read that.
I've been trying to call you.
Someone will say you got a week to read that.
I might leave it at home.
Well, yeah, and today's time, I feel like you don't answer your phone, that's a big deal, but I'm currently leaving voicemail.
Oh,
That's what voicemail is.
Exactly.
there are no rules like get a buy on the first day,
That's it. I
first
found
day.
it.
No, no. That's really the second day
Yeah, we
because they've
supposed to
been
be
last.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, the last one, 8 weeks.
I'll be the shower, I'll be the laundry. I got a point out.
Week off, they gave you about in-person meeting. No, you stay home and have a good.
Yeah. Like, go to the bathroom,
So you're ready to.
there's like 5 minutes calls. Like, I wasn't gone that long.
That's crazy. I guess when people try to get off, you know,
Oh, yes. You know, I don't have a need to take pictures. Ever.
So, thank you.
I can't believe it.
The more emails you send out.
Doug, I'm ready when you are.
Well, nobody's buying it with me because not everybody's rich.
Well, that's true too.
What do we call it?
Like I said, $13 a month,
Thank you.
$10 a day.
Doug, are you ready?
Might be for,
You can't hear me.
You know, he's got headphones on.
Ready? All right, we're ready. Good evening, everybody, and I would like to call tonight's meeting to order. And declare we do have a quorum. I do need to announce that board member Penny DeGarden and Ruth Greco are actually online. So I don't need to excuse them, correct, Michelle?
That is correct.
Okay. And moving on to 1.03, we're looking for the adoption of the agenda. Second. I have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote.
Yes.
Dr. Thomas? Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Greco? And Mr. Gard? We'll get their vote in here in just a second. Moving on to 1.04.
What are you, Jennifer?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a yes. Thank you for reminding me. Moving on to 1.04, we have our Pledge of Allegiance from our Rittner Middle. Can we have them lead us?
Yes.
All right, let us all stand and start our Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we will go ahead and move on to our 1.05, which is our School of the Month with Brittner Middle. And I'd like to call it Dr. Rich.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Brian, just turn the clicker off.
Okay, yes. Thank you. Not my first go around with a
hot mic, I apologize. Thank you for having me here this evening, Brittner Board of Education. It's always a pleasure, privilege to be here for my 5th time in my 5th year as the head principal of Brittner Middle School. Proud to say my 10th year as an administrator at RMS. Needless to say, probably the most interesting of those 10 years, this particular year, as I hope you will see in our slideshow. So what was the key to getting it moving, Mr. Smith? Is it? Oh, button on, yes, sir. Okay. All right. Of course, our vision, in partnership with parents and community, will develop leaders recognized for academic excellence and produce graduates who will become productive citizens and lead lives of integrity and fulfillment. And the mission of our great district is to ensure learning occurs in a supportive environment that enables every student to think critically, solve problems, and develop the knowledge and skills necessary for success in our diverse and global society. So I'm thrilled that this is a new component of these yearly presentations to the board. The recently adopted equity statement. Honestly, I'm proud to let everyone know that tonight's presentation could have fit in just about every bullet that was listed or that is listed on our district's agreement to equity and education. But the 3 that we picked, as you will see in the presentation, committed to treating everyone with respect by valuing individual perspectives and cultural diversity. We encourage the Brittner community to speak up, ask questions, learn more, and build bridges. I would say sometimes a cliche in our line of work, but absolutely I learned just as much from the families that you're about to meet as they learned from me and my partner Rosie Morales in this work. And then defining success by what our families value rather than solely by the success criteria of our state governing body. In this pandemic, we had to find metrics outside of the traditional metrics to measure success. I'm proud to report to this Board of Education that we found those metrics over the many months of this pandemic. Of course, everybody knows phase 3 at the middle school level from the start of school until cannot wait this Tuesday. But what was that journey like? Proud to report that the RMS Wellness Team conducted over 430 in the first 5 months alone. Since that slide, our number has only grown. I'm happy to report that that data was recently shared in a Friday memo that is released by district leadership. Ms. Julie Hahn's section, we're all in this together, but when you got a chance to champion your building, you do it. It's 100 more than any building in the district, and we're proud of that number. The RMS Wellness Team is made up of administrators, myself, that's Mr. Alec Tarrant, and Ms. Alicia Collins. Our great counseling team, of course, members of this board aren't already aware, one of those counselors, Matt Berry, just recently nominated Missouri State Counselor of the Year. Great work with our social workers, our Discipline with Dignity TAs, Mr. Walker and Mr. Thomas. Our librarian, Karen Rook. Not all librarians were put on wellness teams. Karen Rook was an ideal fit and she leaned into the work. Every Friday, students in our community had library book drops at their house, among other visits that she made for students that she case managed. And even our office professionals chipped in this effort. Our student services office professional, Gwendolyn Jones, became kind of the highlight of her very lonely first semester. More than anybody on this team, I think she's ecstatic to see our babies, as she would say if she were here this upcoming Tuesday. So why home visits? We're just getting in the car and staying connected? Well, at a base level, yeah. We miss our families and we'd like to think that they miss us. But some of the specific reasons, you see here, Mr. Berry, welcome back packets for students, and Mr. Berry delivering packets to 6th graders as well. That's a clip from a student who will remain anonymous. Dear Mr. Berry, I'd like to thank you for the gift bag. I cannot wait to meet you in person. That's a new student who has yet to come to our building, but got to know his counselor on his front porch. equipped with a goodie bag. Tech issues, as you'll hear from our testimonials from our families, that right out of the gate was the biggest reason why we made those visits, to get kids up and running with the learning that needed to take place with their Chromebooks online. Attendance concerns, that was one of the biggest red flags after the first few weeks of instruction, to know that the students that were out there not getting plugged in. Item 4 circled off and back to item 3. They weren't getting in because they didn't have the technology. Students of the Month Prize Patrol, these were fun. Every first Friday of the month at both middle schools. It's a collaborative effort, and our RVA. We celebrated Students of the Month and Picks of the Litter, and those goodie bags were delivered to porches. Lots of fun. I told you earlier about library book deliveries. Miss Karen Rook. Just general wellness checks. Kids we were worried about weren't reporting back into class, checking on kids. Sometimes food deliveries to families. And then at the root of the whole issue is keeping kids connected for academic support. A couple of our ICU lifeguards actually went ahead and just settled in on some porches when weather allowed, and literally tutored kids in their backyard. But the highlight of my presentation today is very much not me on the microphone. It is our families that have come tonight with a unique experience. It's tough enough when you're at home trying to make your way through virtual learning. It's another challenge indeed when you are learning English as your second language. And so the invaluable work of my partner, Ms. Rosie Morales, every Tuesday, we got out on the roads consistently to visit our Tuesday crew. Some of the members of that Tuesday crew are here tonight. First up, if Ms. Morales, if you join me, I'd like to introduce Ms. Gabrielle Lopez Bonilla and her family. So every Tuesday, Gabriella, we would visit your home. In your opinion, how did our visits to your home support your learning throughout the semester? She says she's thankful because we helped her a lot. Gabby was an individual who just needed an opportunity to see how these Zoom links worked with her schedules. Once we had her with that in hand, she was up and running, her attendance took off, and her academics rose. So Ms. Morales, if you might get some feedback from Gabrielle's mother.
Cuando nosotros empezamos a visitarla, ¿de qué forma usted miró que ella mejoró?
Pues sí, ella sí mejoró mucho, y pues estoy muy agradecida con ustedes porque pues ella estaba muy baja en la escuela, y pues a partir de que ustedes fueron a mi casa, ella levantó sus grados.
I asked her if how we help her visiting her house. And she said that before that we start visiting her house, she was really low in grades, and she was really low also in assistant, because she wasn't have the information about her schedule first. And we help with that. I dropped the schedule of her house because we tried the computer, and for some reason our Chromebooks, it won't allow her to do. But the following 2 weeks after that, she was logging every day, every hour, and her grades improved a lot.
Gabby, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for being, her father is here in the audience as well. Thank you. Is it appropriate? She was pretty nervous to get up here. Can we give my student a round of applause? Is that appropriate? Am I able to solicit that from the crowd? Thank you, Ritenour. Thank you, Gabby.
Dr. Rich, we'd love to hear some thoughts.
Oh, you know what? See, I got ahead of myself. Yes, sir. Dr. Kilbride.
Thoughts about coming back in person on Tuesday for the first time in 300 days.
Dr. Kilbride, if you've heard his question, Gabby, how do you feel about coming back to the building finally on Tuesday? Good. She feels good.
What she told me when I asked her, she'd rather want to be in school than being at home. She's really excited, but she's really shy.
Okay. Just, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but so in what way? So what do you see as the benefit of coming back to the building on Tuesday? What are you excited about?
Meeting all my friends and my teachers.
She said meeting all her friends and her teachers, who she hasn't obviously seen since March, so.
Great. Thank you for being here tonight.
All right. Thank you. Up next, 8th grader Jefferson Rodriguez and his mother. Jefferson, when we visited him in September, he needed a hotspot. Didn't have any internet at all. And we had no way to know that he didn't have access to the internet. As soon as we started to visit him, again, attendance soared, and academics, he kept plugging away and staying connected to his teachers. So Jefferson, how did our visits every Tuesday, me and Ms. Morales, how did we support your learning during this pandemic?
He said that we helped him a lot, especially with the hotspot, because he tried a lot with the internet that they have it at home, and he couldn't do it with the one that they got at home. And also he said that help a lot, because we have every time when we come home, he got a question for us, and we have the answers that he needs.
And Mom, if you might communicate with Rosie.
De cuando nosotros empezamos a visitar, ¿cuál fue la mejora que usted vio en eso?
Pues le doy gracias a ustedes por haber tomado tiempo para dedicárselo a mi hijo, porque cuando yo creí que ya todo estaba perdido, vinieron ustedes y me ayudaron a levantarlo a él.
She said that she appreciates us a lot because she was trying with him at home. And when she think that everything was done, nothing can do, we show up at her house to rescue him. Is how she described that. And now he's doing good. He's doing really good.
So we'd love to hear is, are we continuing virtually? Or are we coming back in person on Tuesday? Coming back to school?
Yes.
Would love to hear your thoughts on coming back in person next week.
He's really happy to meet the teachers.
Yeah, we'd love to hear Mom's perspective as well.
¿A usted qué es lo que siente de que ahora él va a venir a la escuela o que sigue virtual?
Pues para mí que sí llegue a la escuela.
No, she wants them in school because what she told me before is that it's the only way that he's going to have help, because sometimes at home she cannot do anything to help him, and in school he's going to have the help that he needs.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you.
We have one more student. She was always our last stop on Tuesdays because Mom didn't get off until a little later on. So we always visited Sorelli last. So Sorelli Silverio and her mom and her little sister from Wyland is hiding over there. So Sorelli, you've heard from your classmates. How did our visits on Tuesdays assist you with your learning while you were at home during the pandemic? It helped her a lot because she had bad grades and bad attendance. I'll just, a little nugget here. It's hard enough in the building to get an A in pre-algebra in 8th grade, let alone when you're home virtually. She took an F to an A in the first semester. So just a little fun fact on Sorella, yes. Again, that's challenging enough when we're in the building, let alone at home. And then Mom, do we want?
La pregunta que te íbamos a hacer es de cuando nosotros empezamos a verlos en su casa, ¿de qué forma es que nosotros les hemos ayudado?
En muchos nos ha ayudado pues para ella y pues progresó un poco pues más.
She said that we helped her a lot because her progress she can see right away, and she said thank us to come to her house and help with that.
So are we going back in person? We're going back in person on Tuesday?
Yeah.
Can you share what your thinking is around that?
I think I learned more in person.
She says she's happy because she learns more in person than on Zoom. There you have it. We're excited about Tuesday, folks. Very excited. Yep. That's our presentation. Thank you so much for welcoming me, my partner Rosie Morales, and our great families that were willing to be here this evening. Thanks again.
Rosie, we'd like to thank you and Dr. Rich, but we'd also like to thank the parents. Could you please make sure? Ask them to stand and let us please appreciate them.
Thank you, Board of Education.
I think everybody's excited about Tuesday. Moving on to 1.06, we have our report of closed session. I'd like to report that the Board of Education met in closed session on December 10th, 2020 for the purpose of discussion of personnel agenda items. Moving on to 1.07, we have our public comments. I do have one that is here, and I also have one that was sent in. I'd like to read the one that was sent in first. Dear board members, administrators, and families of Brittner School District. First, I want to thank our school board, administrators, teachers, and staff for their diligent work during this pandemic. While this might not be ideal for all students and families, I believe the district has done their best to make sure our students, teachers, and staff are safe and healthy. I am coming to you tonight regarding our children in the gifted education program. I understand with the students coming back, hybrid, that some adjustments must be made to the gifted program. However, I feel that this is not positive for our gifted students. Research shows that gifted students need to be around their peers, even virtually, for them to thrive. The proposed solution for elementary students takes our students from 4.5 hours a week to 2.5 hours every other week. I would think a better solution would be to keep our gifted students 100% virtual for their gifted studies only. Right now, the proposal is splitting the RVA students in half, even though they are going to be virtual for these classes. I don't understand the thought behind this and why this is the best solution. I have spoken to Dr. Stewart regarding my concerns, as the district has had the number of RVA students who are gifted since the beginning of December to come up with a better solution. My daughter looks forward to her time with her peers every week and feels more challenged when she is in that environment. While I understand that this is not a normal school year, I think all of our students should still have access to the programs that they were given access to before the pandemic. Thank you for your time today and the ability to voice my concerns, even while I'm not able to be present. Thank you, Kay Bradford. Thank you, Ms. Bradford. Our next one is Rob Eaton. Can you come forward?
So I will tell you in advance, Dr. Kilbride and Jennifer, if 5 minutes, just yell at me. Because when I get on a subject that I'm very passionate about, I cannot promise you that I will stop in 5 minutes. So the December board meeting, Stacy during her SSD report talked about the SST path and that nobody from Ritenour was representing it, and would anybody be willing to do it? And during that time frame, I think 4 people turned around and looked my direction. So that was kind of a, hey, guess who's doing it? But I did take that opportunity and run with it. So last night was our first meeting, and I wanted to come and just kind of share with you for a moment. I think it's really cool that we're doing this tonight and then to have SSD sitting here. So it was kind of a neat that it worked out that way. Last night they talked about the opportunity for parents, and you know, when we sit down for an IEP, we've always been told that we can invite anybody we want to invite to that meeting. And so in the past we have, but one of the people that I have always forgotten about is Noah. I've forgotten about my son that this IEP revolved around and forgot to think about inviting him. And that was the topic of conversation last night, was involving our students in the IEP process. So part of me went, well, okay, you can't do that when they're this young. They encouraged us last night to have our children in there starting as early as kindergarten, to at least have them be a part of that conversation, to be a part of making them learn how to speak up for themselves, advocate for themselves. What better place to do it in the setting of the school with their principal, with their teacher, that people that love them and care for them. That's the best place that we can be teaching our children how to advocate for themselves. When they hit that high school time and then they go into adulthood, that the world's not as friendly. And if we can teach them to advocate and talk up for themselves now, we're better off. They gave us a form that I was able to pull up today, and it was really kind of neat. And I'm going to be honest with them, with SSD. I used this form today at work, trying to come up with a way that I can have a conversation with my employees. This form works great as a way to be able to have the student think about things and so we can have a conversation. Noah and Tracy and I can have a conversation before we ever make it to that IEP. And okay, what are your strengths? What do you think you need? So that we're helping him to know how to talk when he gets in there. So I want to thank you for the 4 people that turned their heads towards me that day. You know, it was kind of like, okay, I'll take a look at it. But I walked out or logged off yesterday with a whole new view, a whole new idea of involving our children in that process and having them be, I know that they turn, I believe it's 16, and they're invited to that meeting anyway. I mean, that's just given, but to start teaching them at a younger age how to advocate for themselves. So I did make some copies. So anybody that would like to see these forms, you know, I'm happy to hand them out. Just grab them from me before we end tonight, and you can have them and take a look at them. But it was a lot of very informative stuff. Even for us in running a business, I was able to look at how to talk and communicate better with my employees.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our reports. I will move on to the President's report. We are always excited to tell you about outstanding work our students do in the community. Tonight, we want to give a huge shout out to Addie and Maylee, 2 5th graders in our Gifted and Talented program. Addie Mendez and Maylee Marino organized a canned food drive as part of their unit about food insecurity. They collected more than 400 food items and donated them to the Brittner Co-Care Food Pantry in December. The amazing part is that all of the organization of this for the food drive was done virtually. We want to thank Addie and Maylee for their hard work, generosity, and commitment to our community. Thank you. Next, I'd like to report Ritenour residents interested in filing candidacy in the Ritenour Board of Education election on April 6th can do so by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. 2 positions will be on the ballot this year as the 3-year terms for current board members Lisa Glover-Jones and Orlando Lewis Jr. expire in April of 2020. Your time is sorry. April of 2021. Missouri law requires a person to be a U.S. citizen, at least 24 years of age, a resident taxpayer of the district, and to have resided in the state of Missouri for 1 year immediately preceding the election. With the exception of the first and last day, filing will not occur on legal or school holidays or on the days the school district is closed due to inclement weather. And that is all I have to report. Moving on to 2.02, we have our superintendent's report. Dr. Kilburn.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Slonis. So board members, I'd like to recognize one of our own members of the Board of Education tonight. The first ever student advisor to the Board of Education, Ms. Kayla Ann Baker. Kayla was awarded the Ywca Future Leaders Award. And tonight I'd like to speak about Kayla just a bit and talk about this award. So in December, Kayla received this prestigious Metropolitan St. Louis Ywca Future Leaders Award. Every year, the Ywca honors 9 women and only 1 high school senior for their accomplishments and their leadership. Due to the pandemic, this year's celebration was held virtually. Kayla was selected from a strong group of high school leaders who attended the WISE week-long leadership academy this past summer, which was also held virtually due to COVID. As part of the award, Kayla also received a $1,500 scholarship. And as I've learned tonight, I don't want to share too much of the good news. I understand that Kayla has also received a pretty impressive scholarship from a local university as well. Congratulations, Kayla. At this time, as a result of your efforts and your leadership, I'd ask the entire board and everybody in attendance to give Kayla a standing ovation. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Keep up the great work. So board members, also as a part of my superintendent's report tonight, I had expected to have our attorney, Ms. Amy Clendenin, here with us tonight. Amy sends her regrets. She was not able to end up joining us here tonight. Amy is moving on to a new position, and we wish her well in her transition. She is leaving her firm at Keenan to become the Chief General Counsel of Truman State University. So very excited for Amy in her next position. And I know that we wish her well as she makes the transition. That concludes my report.
Thank you. And we'll move on to our 2.03 with our Legislative Advocacy Committee report.
Thank you, Ms. Lonis. So board members, I uploaded the information that was in the Friday memo just for your information as well as for the community's information. The legislative session started this past week, started off very quickly, and with the support of our locally elected officials, we stay in close contact on what's happening in Jefferson City. To this point, I've already heard from Representative Prouty, from Senator Williams, and from Senator Shoup as we head up to the start, as we headed up to the start of the session. Now that the session has started, I have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with Representative Prouty, Representative Wyndham, and also with Senator Williams. Very lucky in this community to have very close connections with our locally elected officials. So I won't speak on everything that was updated or uploaded in the Legislative Advocacy Committee report, but I will speak on 3 topics that we'll have to keep our eyes, we'll have to keep a close eye on. The first is around open enrollment in the state of Missouri. A number of bills filed on the topic of open enrollment, which would essentially allow students to attend school districts regardless of where they reside. There's been a fund to assist, a monetary fund to assist in the additional costs because in the state of Missouri, the costs of education are funded partially through the state foundation formula and partially through local effort. So we'll keep a close eye on open enrollment. There are a number of states in the union that do have open enrollment. There are a number of advocates for the process and a number of people that have significant concerns around it. We'll go deeper on the topic of open enrollment when we do hold our first Legislative Advocacy Committee meeting. The next topic is around virtual instruction and the move to eliminate district voice and choice in family selection of virtual options through MOCAP. A number of bills filed that would further reduce district voice and reduce the district as a part of this process for selection. Currently, the district liaison for MOCAP is Dr. Deneen Stewart. And Dr. Stewart has been working to support families who have taken advantage of this opportunity. So we do right now have the ability to be a part of decisions in the child's best educational interest. A lot of the bills around virtual instruction in charters would allow the family to work directly through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And the last topic is the topic of tax credit and vouchers. Large number of bills filed on the topic of tax credits and vouchers for private schools and educational savings accounts. I look forward to our first Legislative Advocacy Committee meetings. I'll put the dates of all of those meetings for second semester in the Friday memo tomorrow, and board members are always invited to attend. Concludes my report.
Moving on to 2.04, we have our NSBA report from Dr. Thomas.
All right. Let's first watch our bill from NSBA.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of January. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the decision by the State Board of Education to move forward with state assessments this spring. The State Board voted at its December meeting to continue to administer statewide assessments to students next year, but to suspend the use of the test results from state and federal accountability systems because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Commissioner of Education, Dr. Margie Van Dieven, said during the meeting she expects COVID-19 will have an impact on assessment results.
We don't want our educators spending their time right now thinking about a standardized test. We want them to be educating our kids. And we believe that if they continue to educate the kids to the best of their ability, the scores generally take care of themselves, but we expect to see some differentiation. Who wouldn't expect to see that?
State Board of Education President Charlie Shields said it's important to understand if there are achievement losses as a result of the pandemic.
You know, when this started back in March of last year, I mean, we were talking about just the end of that school year. Now this has dragged on and you know, potentially has a year and a half effect on that. So I think we understand the losses. I think it's also equally important to understand, did those losses occur more in underserved communities? So children that face significant socioeconomic challenges, did we see higher levels of achievement losses in those communities? So once we know that, I think what happens is it allows us to begin to think about what does an appropriate remediation plan look like. But you can't develop a remediation plan if you don't understand the challenge out there.
The decision by the State Board of Education followed a discussion of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's 2021 assessment plan. As the 2021 regular session of the Missouri General Assembly gets underway this month, an issue likely to be discussed is changing the school board election date from April to the November general election. MSBA believes school board elections should continue to be held on the municipal election day. MSBA's Associate Executive Director for Advocacy, Mike Reed, says moving school board elections to the November general election would make those elections more partisan and would create another problem.
The other problem is that there is not an election every November. There's a general election every other November. So it would throw off the election of school board members. So we would elect 4 members one time and 2 members or 3 members the next time. And so it could be very problematic.
MSBA believes school board elections should remain nonpartisan so school board members can focus on what's best for students. By the way, candidate filing for the April school board elections closes on January 19th. There are resources available to school board candidates posted on the MSBA website, including a legal guide to running for the school board. MSBA's priorities for the 2021 session of the General Assembly include legislation to ensure a safe education environment for all children, funding to ensure adequate resources for all school districts to meet state and federal standards, legislation and funding to allow school districts to offer quality, voluntary pre-kindergarten programs, and legislation supporting the expansion of and access to high-capacity broadband internet services throughout Missouri. MSBA will keep you informed about legislative developments during the session through our weekly Legislative Voice newsletter, our daily updates on Twitter, through critical issue alerts, and through periodic webinars. School board members throughout the state will be honored for their work during School Board Recognition Week, February 14th through 20th, as declared by Governor Parson. It's a great opportunity for communities to honor local school board members who provide leadership to our local school districts throughout the state. Check the MSBA website for resources related to School Board Recognition Week. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Well, Brett was reading my mind. I wanted to tell everybody about going to the website, the Missouri School Board's website, and looking at the different things that are there. Candidates, if we have any candidates in the room that need information about running for the school board, that's where you get it right there. Along with, just so you know, starting and being and winning a seat on the school board is just your beginning of being educated as a board member. If you go and look at that website, it'll also tell you the 16 essential hours of education that you have to have done by the end of the first year that you're on the board. And it'll walk you through it and tell you about it, where to be and everything else. For those of us that are on the board already, I know that we get an MSBA weekly report, and it is packed full of things. I have it right here, and it tells us things that are coming up. Free legislative warm-up webinar, MSBA's online new learning opportunities for us. These letters come out weekly, and it's full of information and opportunities for us to expand our knowledge of what's going on. Along with, as Dr. Kilbright pointed out, the legislative session has started, and it'll keep track of those things as well and highlight what's going on. So I encourage everybody to read their emails. If you're not getting the emails, please let Michelle know, and she can help you work that and get that set up. But there's just a lot of information coming from MSBA, and as you know, there's going to be a changing of the guard up in DC here about in another week or so, and there'll be a lot of information coming out from Washington, DC as well through NSBA, our national brothers. So keep tuned to all that and keep up with it, and I wish everybody well and learning and growing. That's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
President, want to share one piece of information that's just brand new, and it's connected to the LAC report, and it's connected to Dr. Thomas's report that he just received. It was just announced Missouri House of Representatives has canceled next week's session due to rising cases of COVID in the Missouri House. So very dynamic time, and we'll keep you updated on all the developments.
Can't keep that 6 foot distance, can you?
Right.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Thomas.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we'll go ahead and move into our business items. We'll move on to 3.01. I'd like to invite Dr. Keenan to come forward for her presentation on from the Special School District Data Report.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you for allowing us to come to your board meeting. I know that you are very busy people, but we want to make sure that as a special school district is here to represent and support the Ritenour students, and we want to make sure that we're really partnering with you in terms of how to support the students within the Ritenour School District. So I'm here tonight. I'm Special School District Superintendent Elizabeth Keenan. Just to let you know, I've been here for a year and a half now in St. Louis County, so it's been quite the privilege to be here and supporting the students across the county in special education. I will have to put a shout out here because Dr. Kilbride, when I first came here, was mentoring me last year, so it was really nice to have that direct connection and really kind of helping me navigate the system that we have here in St. Louis County. Prior to coming to here in St. Louis, I was in Chicago Public Schools. I was the chief officer for special education there. And then prior to that, I was in Minnesota, which is more of the St. Paul area. So just to kind of, not to go through my full resume, but just to kind of let you know the context and the background for me. I also have the privilege to have two other members here. We have Dr. Tammy Yates, she's behind me. She is our Assistant Director, Executive Director for Partner Districts. And she has been really key in supporting not only Brittner, but all the other partner districts and the directors. And we have Ms. Burns. She is this Director of Special Education, and she is assigned to here in Brittner and Pattonville. So tonight we just want to kind of give you a quick overview about special education. I don't want to assume that everybody lives in our world, so we want to kind of give you just kind of an overview and brief update over where we're currently at and how special education is decided and how the roles are determined in each school district. We're also going to talk a little bit more about the special education data and trends. We're going to be talking about some changes to focus on inequities, and that's the approach that we're going to be looking at this year in particular as we start to roll out our budgeting process for special education students across the county. We're going to also touch on some areas of improvement for students with support students with special needs, commitments to the special school from the special school district, and really strengthening our partnership. So to give you a little history about special education, it was not a law until 1975, which is very interesting because we'll talk a little bit about when special school district came to be. So individuals with Disabilities Education Act came in 1975, and it really kind of came in after we started to see with the civil rights movement in the 60s and also with the Brown versus Board of Education. It really looked at how do we make sure that students with special needs were being educated in the public school system. Prior to 1975, students were turned away if they had a disability. And primarily in 1975, it was really for the students who were the significant handicapped students who had multiple handicapping conditions. And you can see as we go through it, the areas of special education has expanded since then. But it was really starting out in the spirit to make sure that all students, no matter what their need is, they were being provided the education equally as other students were in each school district. So special education law, it goes into a lot of different components. We support all of the students from birth, from 3 years old to 21. Birth to 3 is under another area, so that is through the county. But what we do, once they turn 3 years old, the IEP is adopted by the special school district, and we provide early childhood services. That moves into kindergarten all the way up to age 21 for students that require it. Special school district started in 1957, so almost 20 years prior to the law going into place. So that really speaks volumes for the dedication and commitment of the taxpayers across the St. Louis County to provide the special education programming. This is a very, very unique district. This is the only district that, as large as it is, there's one small district in the state of Missouri down in the Boot Hill, but we are the only 2 districts across the United States that exist this way. Most districts, typically what would happen if you were outside the county, you would have to provide, you would receive your federal and your state funds from for special education, but typically that does not cover the entire expenses for special ed. Special education has never been fully funded. So school districts would have to provide the additional funds to support the students. And in some cases, it can be anywhere from 60 to 50% of that being supported by the general education funds in each one of the school districts. So that really tells you that special school district is designed to make sure to take care of that piece of it, so that it's not taking away the overall taxpayer dollars for the Ritenour schools, but it also, what it does is it makes sure that special education is being taken care of and the students with special needs are being supported no matter what their needs are. We also provide services not only for the Ritenour School District for the students who are in the Ritenour, but we also provide services to students who are from Ritenour that require additional services beyond the school system here in Ritenour. There are 14 different categories. As I said, there was probably 1 or 2 when it first started out, and it keeps expanding. We do everything from supporting students with autism, which is one of the newer categories. We support students who are deaf and blind, all the way to visual impairments and early childhood. So there's a wide range, but I just want to make sure that we work through this. There's clear criteria that supports all of the identification for the students in these particular categories. So when we look at special education, we really look at, there's a strong process. There's a lot of laws, there's a lot of language, and when you look at an IEP, it can be very intensive. So but the process really is that you have interventions, you have the referrals, you have the identification process, then you develop the eligibility, you have the IEP, which is the individual education plan for every student who qualifies. And then it's the implementation of the day-to-day supports for the students. And then every year you review that IEP, there's an evaluation process, and then there's also a evaluation process every 3 years. So there's this wide variety of delivery models. We want to make sure that not one size fits all. IEPs are very individualized. And when we want to make sure that every child first has access to the general education environment. And you're going to hear that as kind of a theme for how we can work together and partner with Ritenour. We want to make sure that when students have access to just because you are identified with a disability, doesn't mean that we have to limit access to the general education, the core curriculum. So there is co-taught classes also that if the student needs additional supports in there. There's the resource model. Resources when a special education teacher provides services or core content to students in a separate setting in special ed. They also do and support other parts of their IEP and interventions. And then there's the self-contained classrooms. So self-contained classrooms are where kids are removed for the majority of their day, and they're not with their general education peers to the extent that if you were in a general education classroom. So self-contained classrooms are students who are there for pretty much most of the day and spend most of their educational experience in it with that classroom. Related services are really those services that if you think about if you're going to a clinic or to a hospital for physical therapy, occupational therapy, those are the things that we also provide. One of the big things I want all of you to know is that all of these services that we look at, it is not an arbitrary decision. It's based on the needs of the students within Ritenour. So when you look at music therapy in particular, there's a criteria to support students. And one of the questions that's come up is music therapy supported throughout the 22 districts? Absolutely. All of these services are provided. Now, there might be varying differences of how much is being provided, but it really is determined by the number of students and the level of IEPs and what the supports look like. So I just want to make sure that everybody feels like we are making sure that we're looking at all these pieces as we just look at our not only the needs of the student, but the support, the staffing. We also have supplementary aids and services, which really kind of is the full gamut of what we provide. We can provide adult support services, which is a paraprofessional. We provide speech therapy services, visual impairment services. So you can see that there's a wide variety of experts that we have to employ to support our students across the county. So SSD really is wanting to make sure that we focus in on equity. And I noticed you guys have your equity statement up there, and I think that's really great. And I think it's commendable that as districts are embarking on that. The special school district right now is a part of, we're working on our strategic planning process. And we just adopted one of our core values, which is equity. And the core value of equity is every student, regardless of learning, ability, or social economic status, deserves access to the services that they need to succeed. And so we really wanted to make sure we looked at this approach across the county, because all doesn't mean all sometimes. All means that we're going to look at supporting all of our students, but there needs to be some ways for us to look at it through different lenses to make sure that we're supporting all of our districts and the students in those districts differently. So we looked at an internal study, and in that internal study, we looked at what we've done typically in the past. We looked at caseloads, we looked at minutes, we looked at identification and least restrictive environment. Those are the things that we've been putting into the equation for allocations of staff. But then we also looked at higher rates of poverty and more of those areas where we see that there's data to support that the students in those districts are typically, or there's more higher rates of marginalized groups of students that are underserved or underrepresented. And so to give you some examples of this is there's a large variance of mobility rates. We added this into one of the factors. You can see that at Rockwood, the mobility rate is 8.6. But when you go to Normandy, which is a smaller district than Rockwood, you have 43%. You almost have half the students in Normandy having some indicator of mobility, which is a factor in how students are being supported educationally. We also looked at free and reduced lunch rates, which is the poverty rates that are indicators for the districts. There are less than 5% of the families living in poverty in the 8 partner districts of Kirkwood, Rockwood, Webster Groves, Ladue, Layton, Lindbergh, and Brentwood and Parkway. But when you look across the other part of the county, we have 8 districts that are 100% or 100% free and reduced lunch. Those are Normandy, Riverview Gardens, Jennings, Hancock Place, Hazelwood, Ferguson, Florissant, Ritenour, and U-City. So that's a very different approach to look at. We will provide services, but what does it mean when we see those other districts where there are other indicators that they require and deserve more supports and services? And we also noticed that for Ritenour, you and Bayless are also the 2 districts that have the higher rates of students with EL, English learners. So we want to make sure that that has to be a differential for both, particularly for you and for Bayless. Here's a heat map that we kind of did across the county when we overlaid our internal study. This really shows how the county looks in terms of, we looked at the distressed communities indicator, indexes. And when we looked at this, you can clearly see that the way when we were looking at providing services, we were applying one layer of service. But what we want to look at this is we need to have a variance or a differentiated approach to support districts that have these higher rates of index. You can see that the ones who are Hazelwood, Ferguson, Florissant, Riverview Gardens, Jennings, Normandy, Ritenour, U-City, Valley Park, and Hancock Place. And interesting that, we've seen several indicators for you guys with Brittner in terms of where you're having higher rates of different areas of need and supports. So the approach we're looking at for this next year is really looking at how do we focus on all, some, and few. We're taking that response to intervention approach. Our budgeting approach is to support all students and to meet the needs of the services to support them. However, we approach the zero-based budgeting to not only look at what everyone needs, but also what are the additional needs that are required of focused approach. So when we looked at this, we said, we're going to make sure that the IEP needs are taken care of. All of the services that go into every IEP, we need to make sure and ensure that those services are being provided. We're looking at case management, caseloads, and we're applying a formula across the board so everybody has the same understanding. We want this to be a very transparent process. But we also know that there's these districts that have been identified for disproportionality or targeted schools. And we're going to treat those districts differently. We're going to make sure that everybody has their formula applied for some resources and supports in the tier 1. But then we're also going to make sure that when we're planning and going over the budget with the superintendents, that the disproportionality districts, we are going to have a clear plan. So what are we going to do with those additional funds to support these districts in multi-tier systems of supports or RTI modeling? And then we want to take it to the next level with the tier 3. Some districts are in all 3. Brittner is in all 3 of these categories. So Brittner will be having discussions with Dr. Kilbride and his team about what is it that we're providing for all students, what are we doing with the disproportionality, and then what is it that we can provide on top of that to support those RTI and MTSS supports, and really embedding those pieces into the district so that it is a meaningful model that is a value add to not only the district, but the students.
Dr. Keenan, can I ask a question
Yes.
here? And so to be clear, so the tier 3 directly connects to the distress index, and
Yes.
that's how you arrived at how the districts were broken up?
Yep. And it was really clear when you start to see, when you pull in the poverty rates and you pull in the mobility and you look at the distressed rates, the same districts are having the same indicators where other districts are not seeing those same indicators. And to me, it really shows that we have different needs in districts. And I think that's one of the things I heard the most coming here from our partner districts is how do we make sure we're supporting all of the county, but the county isn't all the same. There's very different experiences. However, we do have indicators to show that we do have areas of improvement and that we do have some real quality places within the county that model how do we support students in the general education environment. For instance, when we look at different districts, we know that some districts have almost 80% of their students in the general education environment. Now that's a different experience if you're a student in another district where only 60% of you are in there. Meaning that when the district that has the students who are more in the gen ed environment with those supports, we see higher rates of proficiency, we see higher rates of supports in that gen ed environment. When you're pulling out the students with that 60%, they're getting a different experience educationally than if you were a student in another district. And I want to make sure that we understand the nuances in every district, but layering in how do we see some areas that we can really improve upon together. So we're going to talk a little bit about checks and balances, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Yates.
You want me to click her? Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you. As Dr. Keenan said, the next few slides, I'm going to talk about checks and balances and then our planning and system and supports. So when we look at the partnership agreement, the unique dual district system, it's very important that the SSD and the partner districts work together to ensure that checks and balances. So when we look at the stakeholders at the building level, we're looking at how our general ed teacher, special ed teacher, and related service providers, our school counselor, our building administrators, and our SSD area coordinators work together to ensure all those required components. So talking and collaborating on making sure that our students are getting appropriate access to that general education curriculum and also the special education materials, supplemental materials that they would need. They were really focusing on the interventions and the supports for all students. That we are having active participants and collaborative experiences through that IEP and special ed process. So we're having a system of collaborative decision making. Making sure that we are sharing data, taking effective data, sharing it on both sides and really using it to drive our decisions. And then looking, the building and administrator and the SSD area coordinator looking and talking about SSD staff allocation, what those models look like. Together working on staff evaluations, what that space allocation looks like. And then the provision of effective professional development for our staff in order to meet our students' needs. So then one step up, we look at our district level. So how that looks is our stakeholders working together. As we have our SSD area coordinator, as you can see, they have impact at the building and the district level. Our SSD director, our partner district liaison, our SSD executive director team, and then our superintendents. They also support all those areas just at a higher level. So still making sure that our building level staff and teams have what they need in order to ensure that students have that access to curriculum and materials, that we're working on that special ed process. Further looking at the professional development, that we have the technology needs for our staff and students in order to be effective. And also that shared responsibility in ensuring that our students have their transportation needs met. So how do we do that? So how we look at planning with our partner districts is we have this on many different levels. So first, starting with the superintendent collaboration. Dr. Keenan working with the partner district superintendents for those roundtable and individual meetings. Doing quarterly check-ins that really focus on sharing that key information for each district. The quarterly updates on our overall initiatives and trends. Really focusing on our budget meetings, having a lot of those discussions around the budget and how we can best support our partner district needs. Also, governing council and the parent advisory council. And then looking at our partner district partnership, Chiquita McRiddle and I, as well as our ELT and our directors have really worked on having those individual meetings with liaisons and our partner district teams, focusing on what are the initiatives of both the districts. Are we aligning our goals? And are we effectively collaborating? Building our director and AC relationships with our district and school level administration. Really ensuring that we have a collaborative approach with our directors and participation in our partner district administrative teams so that they're part of those leadership team meetings and at the cabinet level if possible. And then talking about our annual budget planning and meetings and really making sure that our budgets are aligning for adequate support. Further, we have our teaching and learning. So that is our level where we have a plethora of resources. We utilize our effective practice specialists. We really focus on what professional development that we can provide to our SSD staff and to our partner district in order to make sure our students have what they need. We have many instructional resources. Our technology support, our technology department has worked really hard, especially with this pandemic, and ensuring that our staff and students have the technology they need, hotspots and all that other support. And then our PETA department, which is our parent education and diversity awareness. We also have an awesome array of supports and trainings, problem solving. We have our parent advisory councils, and we offer a lot of leadership support also to build that leadership capacity in our parents and really look to increase our student and family engagement. So this we kind of broke down specifically to Ritenour. So when we look at our educational model, we're looking at our multi-tiered system. So Dean, if you can answer or step in if I miss anything. So with our tier 1, we're looking at our Ritenour core curriculum, and that's what we have, all of our students should have access to in that tier 1. But for those students who aren't making that necessary progress that we're looking for, we then step up to tier 2. So this is what we can provide on top of that tier 1, that supplemental intervention, on top of the core instruction. And what we did is we broke it down into 3 main areas that we tend to focus on, which is literacy, math, and social emotional learning. We also then further broke it down to what Ritenour offers, which is a lot of great resources, and then what we at SSD can then supplement with to offer more interventions and supports at that tier 2. Then we move up to tier 3, and that's oftentimes where our special education fits into. For our students that are getting their tier 1, that supplemental instruction in tier 2, and still just need that extra level, and then often qualify for special education, where then the IEP kicks in and we add those special education services. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Dee, who's going to talk to you about your data.
Thank you. Good evening. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about our students in the Ritenour School District. So some of the demographic data, just in general, a lot of this is information you're already familiar with, is we are a district that is accredited. We are a district that is 100% free and reduced lunch community eligible. Some of the important information that I see here when I think about how is our district doing in comparison, or how is our district and our students with IEPs that are served in the Ritenour School District doing, there's some things that we have an opportunity to focus on. Looking at that attendance rate and what might be affecting that attendance rate for our students with disabilities, and what is that barrier to our students graduating in 4 years. That seems to be an area that we need to really look at. We are getting students graduated in 5 years, but we need to look at what's happening with that 4-year graduation rate. The other thing that I want to share with you is our assessment performance data. You can see how the district is doing overall for all students, but at the very bottom, you can see that difference, that gap analysis that we're looking at for how are our students doing with IEPs in comparison to all of the students in our district. And there's opportunities there. Our students are struggling, or there's a significant gap when you look at that ELA performance, math performance, and science. And I have some thoughts and ideas about why that might be, and that focus on how are we ensuring that all students have access to that core instruction may be a critical piece to this. So the incident rate, you'll sometimes hear it referred to as the incident rate, but it's really the number of students who are identified relative to the population of the school. So nationally, students are identified with a disability at a rate of about 12.9% nationally. Then you look at the state, because sometimes we go straight to what does it look like in the county, but maybe we should be benchmarking ourselves to some other areas as well. And the state average is the 13.7. When you look at St. Louis County at 16.141 compared to the 16.87, you think, oh, that's pretty close. But actually, if you go back to those state numbers, that's something for us to take a look at. In Brittner, you can see that aligned to the county, and when it comes to males and females, we're very close in that area. When it comes to the identifications of individuals with disabilities.
And one thing I'd like to take a comment around that is a national trend that males are twice as likely to be identified in special education than females. Mm-hmm. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio piece of that. So that's been a trend that's been happening in special education for the last 10 years or so.
So across the county, you can see that over multi-year, pretty much the individuals who are white are educated are identified at about a rate of around 51.5%, and primarily individuals who are identified as Black are about 39%, and that's across the county. The next slide is going to speak to Ritenour, and of course our demographic may look a little bit different. You can see that for that trend, you see, and I think that if you look at the white, you see a pretty consistent identification of individuals who are white, and then you see a little bit of a trend down when it comes to individuals, our African American or our Black population. You do see a little bit of an increase when it comes to individuals who identify as multiracial, and then of course our EL population. A little bit of a trend up. So one of the questions when we speak about how we're delivering services is really looking at what does that look across the county in the delivery of services, special education services. And at the very bottom, you'll see on average for teachers in St. Louis County, they deliver approximately around 7,350 minutes. If you look specifically at Brittner, which is second highest on the list, you'll see that our teachers are delivering per teacher approximately or on average, 9,310 minutes. When you think about what that means, it will become clearer in the next couple of slides. We're delivering a lot of services to kids. And the question is, what kind of results are we getting, and how is that, and where are we delivering those services? On the second slide, I'm sorry, can you go back just one slide, please? Thank you. If you also notice, when you look at it by building, it does give us an opportunity to segregate that down and take a look at where are those services, or how are they being delivered. And you'll notice that when it comes to Brittner High School, on average of teachers they're delivering, or they are delivering and kids are receiving a lot of services, disproportionate to that county average, if you notice that. The second one is Wyland, and then third is Kratz. Now, I do want to use some caution with this because we do have some center-based programs that have students that have some intensive services. So it's something for us to keep in mind as we're looking at that. But we are higher. We are delivering a lot more services.
So
I may.
Can I ask a question there too? So when you say center-based programs, can you explain a little bit?
Oh, I would be happy to. So we have programming. We are very fortunate in Brittner that we do provide services for all of our students. We have really created programming around the unique needs of each of the learners. We have center-based programs in the area of autism for those really complex students that have a lot of, that the autism is impacting them at a pretty significant level. And that allows us to also have their therapies and intensive services at those buildings. That would be Marvin. In addition, we have a program for our kids who have complex needs at Ywca as well. So those center-based programs provide us the opportunity to get those therapies and that intensive support to kids in some of our center-based programs. In addition to that, we do deliver the different, all of the different service delivery models that were described in a previous slide.
I guess one thing, if I may, what does 7,000 minutes look like, right? So 7,000 minutes was the average across the county. And thinking in terms of a lot of times what Dee was describing with the students in those center-based programs, that's about 15% of our overall population. The majority of the students are in those mild disability categories where they are receiving services in the gen ed and in the special ed and have, they might receive some other additional services, but not to the intensive level of a center-based program. 7350 is, when you break it down, the average amount of a caseload of a teacher across the county, meaning the teachers have about 12 students on their caseload. So they see 12 students on their day. They have IPs that are for 12 students, right? That's the average across the county. When you look at the 7350, breaking that down, on average, most students across the county are receiving 60 minutes for reading or probably 60 minutes for math, right? So when you take the 60 minutes and you times that times 5, that equals 300 minutes. And then you take that for reading and math, you get 600 minutes. So the average amount of services students are receiving across the county are generally 2 hours of supports of special education a day. And that's what that breaks down. When you get up into the 8,000, 9,000, you're adding in another class. Basically, when a student, instead of receiving reading and math, some students are receiving reading and math, science, and social studies. And that's the difference between what 7,000 minutes are and 10,000. That makes sense. So you keep adding those pieces. And the reason we say the minutes and the importance of that is we have to think about a child's experience. And when are students able to be a part of a general education environment to support and be a part of that strong, rigorous, standard-based instruction that's happening in the general education classroom?
And the next slide really does describe that. So when you think about that participation and access in the general education classroom, you can see in St. Louis County, they're referring to it as LRE 1, 2, and 3. What it really speaks to is the amount of time that you're participating in the general education classroom. And you can see as you look at that comparison side by side with Brittner, our students are spending more time in special education, especially when you get into the LR3 category, which is where most of their day is being spent. And as Dr. Keenan just spoke to, that would really encompass reading, literacy skills, numeracy skills, and moving into some of the other content areas, which might be science, social studies, and social emotional learning. That's when you get into that 12.8% where they're spending 80 to 100% of their time. Back to that other point, there are children that do have complex needs in those center-based programs, and we do certainly want to have them included to the greatest extent possible. But those therapies do take up a great deal of their day, but that's not a significant proportion of students that we are serving. So this is just another slide that is showing some trend data over time when it looks like we've been pretty consistent in that service delivery model across the county. And as you look at it in Brittner, pretty consistent there. And I do think when you go, can you go back one slide? When you really think about that 40 to 80, let me get my plastic category. So you're 80, you're 40% and you are 80%, and then you're greater than 40% in general education, you really get to some pretty high numbers of the amount of time that kids are being removed from the general education classroom. Another interesting data point is looking at students by ethnicity across the county. As you go back and look at this over time, some of the primary disability areas will be telling as we lay into the Brittner category. And I can ask you to take a good peek at the other health impairment, autism, and emotional disturbance, and see how that compares to how we're serving students in our Brittner School District. So in Brittner, you can see that if you're other health impaired, If you are an individual who's been diagnosed with autism, or you're an individual who's been diagnosed with an emotional disturbance, you can see that in comparison to the county data, you're spending more time in special education. It does challenge us to think about that and to ask what supports might be needed in order for our children to be able to participate to the greatest extent possible with their non-disabled peers. So Dr. Keenan was speaking to the county averages when it comes to students and staff ratios. As you can see in the highlighted yellow, the county average is 13 for case management. As you can see in Brittner, we are the second highest when it comes to the caseload ratio, and that is at 14.55. To the right, you can also see that the deep dive into the information has indicated that we do have some teachers that have some greater numbers. I'll be able to speak to that on a slide that we'll get to for CREDS. But you can see that our district is looking very hard at those numbers and wanting to see how we can make those adjustments. Speaking of CRATs, you can see, I hope that we can look at this data with a little bit of explanation. When we pull this data, unfortunately, it pulls 1.0 FTEs into the data. In CRATs, they are not having a caseload of 25. It is a shared position, so there's a traveling position that is occurring. It just doesn't reflect there. So I want you to know that that is, although it's the way the data pulls, we do have more than 3 staff at CRATs right now. We have 3.5 in order to support that. And then you'll see later on through the budget process that we're hoping to be able to address that as well. In addition, you can see that several of the schools are under that. We have 4 schools under the 13 caseload average. We have a couple of schools right around there, and then we have some schools that are above that average. Staffing allocations, this will give you an outline of what kind of staffing we have provided to the Ritenour School District. The one area that I would want to focus on, there are 2 actually. First of all, under social workers, we see that we have 6 social workers assigned. One is under DP, that stands for disproportionality. So we have been able to, beginning that work around collaboration and trying to be a support to the district. We did bring a social worker in under disproportionality funds this year, and she is assigned to the Brittner Middle School, and she's a part of that counseling department and social work department, and she's an integral part working with students prior to identification. Oh wait, can you go back? There was one more piece I wanted to share. As we get into the slides, you'll also see that under nurses, because nursing services are so individual to a particular student, you will see fluctuation depending on a student. So we may have a student who has a nurse 1 year, and then perhaps they move. So you may see the next year in our trend data that there may be 2 nurses or 1 nurse. It's not that we're taking anything away, it's because there was something about that student. Either they didn't require the nursing services anymore, or perhaps they're no longer in the district, and that's why that position would have moved. Speaking of trend data, so over the last, I have 3 years worth of trend data here, just taking a look at those staffing allocations. And I wanted to make sure that you were aware of the different positions over the course of the years that we've been able to continue to add and support the district. School psychologists have been an integral part of the district, and they've been an integral part of working with problem-solving teams over the years. So we really appreciate that expertise that we're able to bring into the organization as well. One of those areas that is a little bit of a struggle gets to staff mobility. It is nationally, you will find that special education does have a high turnover rate. That's just that's a fact nationally. However, we do have a mobility rate. I don't have it as a rate, but I can tell you the raw numbers of how many teachers, paras, and speech language pathologists that we have had positions open. And it works to be around 20-21% turnover on the high years, and then much less in those lower years. I will say that mobility rate may be people who retire, who leave the profession, who transfer to another district internally within the organization. So it's just that turnover. Under teachers, it does include adaptive PE. Some of our therapists are in there because they're not showing up under the speech language pathology category as well. So I had the privilege of serving the Ritenour School District for many years now, and I have always enjoyed the collaboration and the respect that we've had in working together. And so when I think about what kind of supports that we've been able to provide or be a part of, We are definitely a part of that professional development. Principals, staff are open and willing and interested in the professional development opportunities that we can provide, and we can learn and grow together with our partners. We've been able to add that social worker position in that targeted school of Brittner Middle School in order to do some pre-intervention services for kids. We've been working with technology. It's been a delight to work with Fred in working through some of our technology challenges. And then also those instructional supports. Many of the principals, the schools, the problem-based teams utilize our PBIS coaches. We have just so many resources available through facilitators, area coordinators, myself, all of us together working to be able to give those instructional supports to teams. So what kind of support have we been providing to those targeted schools? Remember, we talked about the 4. We've really been collaborating with building administrators. The core piece of moving forward, I believe, is that implementation at a high level of Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. As you know, Ms. Hahn has had that leadership for many, many years now, and it's really just continuing that work together. We've been able to add that position for social worker at Brittner Middle School, and just to share with you, I have requested another request for a social worker to work with Hake Middle School based upon some of that discipline data that we've seen over the years, as well as performance data concerns. If we can keep kids in school and we can keep them in class, I believe we can keep them learning. Professional development, many of the schools will identify professional development either through their teams or through the principal's requests or through even something that we may see as a need. And principals have been excellent about making time available for us to be able to provide that professional development. Special education staff have been an integral part of the student support teams and problem-solving teams. Our social workers, our school psychologists, special ed teachers, our speech language pathologists all serve on those committees to be able to give input and ideas on how to support kids. We have worked with the principals on collaborative walkthroughs and providing feedback, and then also really taking a look at the special education services and those tiered interventions and making sure and ensuring that we have students getting their services, their instruction from a general education teacher as much as possible. So how do we collaborate and work together? I think a lot of these things we do well, and I think we can always do better, is being at the table during initiative conversations and programming. I'm always invited. I know the principals always invite the area coordinators and the teachers to the table as well, and just continue to do that. The opportunity to continue to engage with the Board of Education and share with them key information and key data, and share as well as receive from you as well your questions and concerns. The ability for our kids to participate in that general education, really going back and looking at that least restrictive environment data and seeing what we can do to enhance and support our kids in being able to participate with their non-disabled peers and access to the core at the greatest extent possible. An endeavor that we've all been working on for a long time is really looking at that suspension rate, because as kids are out of classrooms or out of their special education services because they're not in school, it's just putting us behind in being able to deliver those services and move kids forward. And then we've been working on this for several years, but continue to make sure that we have LEA and general education representation at the IEP so that we can get feedback and people can learn about how that person's disability is affecting them and what supports they may need from general education as well as special education. So what are we going to do next? We're going to keep working on those multi-tiered systems of support with Ms. Hahn. She has actually, on her team, she does have special education representation area coordinators, our school psychologists serving on that as well. Keeping on those trauma-informed school action plans and seeing how that we can support that, whether that's through some of our CEIS funds or our professional development that's available through the planning and development. No, I'm getting it wrong. Planning and development? Teaching and learning. Sorry, I knew we changed names. Creating a unified plan to increase the inclusion of students, just really going back to that LRE. How do we get kids in the core curriculum? How do we make sure that they're in that core curriculum? Continuing to work on and then really looking at those budget presentations. You know, Dr. Keenan spoke to really overlaying that information and making sure that we are collaborating and supporting the district to the greatest extent possible through that budget process. strategic plans and initiatives. If you go to our website, you can see that tiered model that was shown in the display is also, in the presentation, is also available on the Special School District website. In addition to that, you would also find the professional learning plans on how we're going to provide that professional development to staff in order to implement those tiered models. And then looking at all of the technology needs that we have for students, teachers, and in our classrooms. And are there any questions for myself or Dr. Keenan? Okay.
So you want to share some of the data tonight, which I think is very helpful. So when we talk about specific interventions and strategies, can you give me a timeline of what you're looking at? Are you just in the beginning stages of planning with the district? Or are you at the point where we're actually have examples of interventions and strategies that we're utilizing here in Brittner to address the disparities?
We do, to address the for the tiered intervention models? I'm not sure.
You, with your presentation, you said that there were disparities and you had strategies that you're in that planning stage.
We're in the planning stage, we are.
Yeah, so are you at the beginning state of that, or do you have actual examples of some of these strategies that were utilized here in Brittner to address the disparities?
Well, I think that some of the strategies that we're starting to work on is how can we get that pre-intervention strategy in place. We've been working with Msba when it comes to positive behavior supports. That's been a very big initiative that we've been able to support through the teaching and learning department, as well as looking at functional assessments and positive behavior support plans, trying to look at discipline from a teaching standpoint as opposed to always being a punitive action is probably a critical area that we've been able to look at. In addition to that, we've worked really hard in looking at the intervention, the academic piece as well. And that goes into those tiered models of academics. Was I not speaking?
Yeah, so it's, in my mind, I'm processing it. To me, that's kind of some of the beginning states of our strategic plan, as we're talking about addressing disparities.
I think digging into, in addition to that, digging into the data and really looking at who are our students and where are they being educated. I think that we all want to help kids. I think that is a key piece. And sometimes I think that we forget that helping kids is helping them in the classroom. And we think that if I look back to some of the decision making, sometimes we look at they need help. So we keep layering on more services. And I appreciate that, but then the other side is, can we deliver those services in the general education classroom? Can we work side by side with the classroom teacher in delivering services, not just to that student, but to other students as well, and much more kids?
And so if we're talking about working side by side with the teacher, how much of the training process, like are we actively training the teachers now for that, or are we in the beginning stages with training the staff?
It's building by building. That is truly a building by building. We have the collaborative teaching model has been in place for a long time. We bring that back as often as a principal says that there's a need for that. Because you have to remember there's always going to be that turnover piece. So you're going to have a new special ed teacher, or you're going to have a new general ed teacher. So I would say there's collaborative teaching that goes on in this district at least annually, some in some pocket or place. So it's really continuing to educate people on how to implement that model at the highest level. And that really is driven by the principal and the area coordinator conversation based upon need.
I'm sorry. If I can add, I just came back over here so I could see the presentation. Another area we're looking at with those disparities is Dr. Keenan and Dee said, is with those caseload numbers and really looking at that in our staffing and how we can adequately, like Dr. Keenan said, with those disparities across the county, really looking at how we can ensure that we are meeting the needs with those supports, with the staffing, with the materials, with the resources, to really help make that gap smaller. And so that's on top of the initiatives that Dee was talking about. Those are some of the things we're also looking at.
Yeah, I mean, because when you think about it, somebody has 12 on their caseload, and somebody has 14, and that's already a disparity. So.
Correct. And so just to dig a little deeper, and I don't mean to take up too much time, when we look at those caseloads, it is important to look at the numbers, but we're digging deeper in that because it's not just about the numbers. because we're looking at the level of needs the students have, what that programming looks like, how that staffing model is and what that programming model is, whether we have staff that travel from building to building. Do we have center-based programs, or they're mostly resource type positions? So when you ask where we are on that stage, we're kind of beginning to middle right now, where we have really taken that data and pulled it apart, and we're having those ongoing conversations with directors and area coordinators in our ELT to really see how we can make that shift and add, as we talk through that budget process this year, what we can do to minimize the gap with those disparities as we look at going into next year.
And I think if I can complement that, so that's a great point. So when you think about it, if we have an average, the caseload is 14.55. And then in addition to that, you have teachers who are serving something around 9,300, close. I don't have my data in front of me and I don't have my glasses on. So what it means is their groups are larger. They're seeing more kids, but they're seeing them longer, and their groups are going to be larger because you still only have the same amount of day in order to deliver them. As we increase staffing or we get closer to that county average, that will allow those groups to be even smaller, which I think is beneficial to kids.
Does that help?
That does.
Okay. You're welcome.
I'd like to ask a question, and I'm just looking at the numbers and I want to make sure I'm not missing something. So when I look on slide 32, it shows 2021 that we have a little over 1,100, but then in the numbers that you give us by building, it's at 885. So
I'm sorry, Ms. Lowe, President Lunds. Slide 32 compared to which slide?
34.
There is an interest, the data always gets pulled at different times. So if you're talking about the 1147 number of students, and then you're seeing us with which?
On page 34, it says student number and it says 885. So there's like 300 different. And so I just want to make sure like we don't have actually more students.
President Lunds, I'm not seeing your on page 34.
It's down at the student number
Yeah, it's Brittner by building.
table at the right.
Oh, I see where you are. I think I might be able to explain that. Sometimes when they're pulling data, they're pulling special ed data, and then sometimes they're including the speech language pathologists.
Yeah.
So that could be the difference could be the kids who are primarily diagnosed speech or language.
Okay.
So sometimes, and sometimes that's just a matter of how the data was pulled, because if they're talking about special ed minutes, when I think of special ed, sometimes I think of related services a part of that, but if they're pulling the data, they could just be looking at the special ed piece and not the related services.
That is only students with teachers that supports students. The speech language students are not included in that.
Okay.
Okay.
So putting an asterisk underneath there. Probably.
Okay.
But thanks for catching
that.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure like
we're not missing 300 kids.
Yeah, we're not missing 300 kids. And then also sometimes you'll see, because we provide special education services to our children at the Early Childhood Center, sometimes we'll see their data in there as well. And if we don't catch that, we've got to pull that.
Okay. Thank you.
One of the, what do you need from Brittner, Gen Ed participation in IEPs, what's your perspective on how we're doing with that?
You know, I want to do a celebration. Not that I would ever want the pandemic to, you know, I'm not interested in that. That's been something. We have had amazing participation of parents as well as our teachers and our counselors and principals as we've been virtual. I'm not sure the why, but it's been a wonderful thing. I think the high school has gotten up to, I think last time Ann pulled the data, it might have been 90 in the 90 percentile, maybe even closer to 95% of that participation. I think that when you get into the high school sometimes, and those IEPs are occurring during the school day, it's that challenge of making sure that we have the general education teacher that knows the student and the way that disability is affecting them at the grade, so that they can provide that feedback and information to the team. It's a little bit challenging during that instructional day to be able to get someone there. But she has worked, again, when you focus on it, it can be done, and they've been able to do I don't think that that's been a big barrier in Rittner.
I apologize. Ms. Greco, who is by YouTube, had sent in a few questions, and I think that you guys answered them all in your presentation, so I'm just confirming with her if she has any. Okay, so I don't think she has any other questions. I think one of her questions was how many SSD personnel are at each district, and you have a slide in there. So I'll make sure that she has that information and can see that.
You know, one comment I'd like to make, so the communities index and then the tiering of resources by district, you know, having partnered, you know, being a part of an organization that partners with special, you know, for a number of years in administration, I appreciate the structure and the approach that you're creating, because that structure and approach has not been there before. You know, board members, sometimes it feels like resources, there can be a tug of war between districts for resources, I would say, because the structure is not clearly known as to how those decisions are made through that budgeting process. So I very much think that this tiered system for resources is definitely a step in the right direction. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kilbright. The process for this is really hearing the feedback from all of the partner districts. We did some focus groups. We've also, you know, the discussions I've had with the superintendents, and this came out clear in terms of how do we support the districts differently, because all does not mean all. All of us are not the same, and the difference is across it. But I don't want what I don't want is one district to feel like we're gaming it from them or taking it from here and putting it over there. We're trying to make sure we're leveling the playing field so that everybody has the appropriate services for the students, but we are differentiating it. And we've been testing this out with several of the districts and the superintendents, and, you know, being clear that this is why. When you show the data, people understand why we have to look at providing supports to Rittner differently than we do in another district that has very different indicators there. So it was really a response to hearing directly from our partner districts in order to support their individual needs.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much for your time.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
For your time.
All right, we'll move on to 3.02, our custodial service extension with Mr. Smith.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I am joined tonight by Todd Eskra. Todd is with WFF, and he is their Chief Operations Officer. And I'm also joined by Reagan Winston, and Reagan is the Regional Director of Operations for WFF. All right. So safe and clean facilities provide spaces where teachers can meet the mission and vision. And to meet our commitment to equity, facilities should provide the best physical environment for learning to occur, and all district schools should provide consistent and equitable environments for learning. In 2017, Rittner entered into a 3-year agreement with WFF Custodial Services, and last year we extended the agreement for 1 year. When fully staffed, WFF has performed very well, and tonight I'll be recommending a 1-year extension to that agreement, and I would like to explain the reasons why I'll be making that recommendation. Rittner is in the process of hiring night custodians to coordinate the work of the WFF cleaners. This change in staffing will improve oversight of cleaning in each building. Historically, transitioning to a new custodial company results in a significant loss of quality as one company leaves and another company comes on board. Staffing for WFF has improved this year, and staffing was also high in 2018, and we know that when they are staffed, their service is good. The oversight of WFF has improved. Todd, the Chief Operating Officer, came on board, and I've been working with him since August. I have confidence in his dedication to the service that he wants WFF to provide, to continue to provide to Brittner. The pandemic has created a great challenge for us, and though I believe we have control rates of COVID within the schools, occasionally that has popped up, whether it was from teachers or from students. WFF has been very accommodating to their response. When there is a positive case, it takes a tremendous amount of disinfecting and cleaning when that happens to make sure that transmission does not occur in the school. And the cultural alignment between WFF and RSD, I've learned over my couple of years being in this position, is commendable. We continually discuss equity, and I have noticed that WFF puts people above profit. And this is, I've noticed this because when a position becomes available, a custodial position becomes available for Rittner, WFF, allows us to interview their very best and to hire their very best. And so they have, spent the money to hire and to train and to develop great employees, and then they allow us to hire those employees. And that comes as a cost to them. And that's never been an issue. They've never batted an eye at having that happen. And then lastly, our hope is to return to phase one for the 2021-2022 school year, to have students fully in person. When that happens, we will have to move all of the furniture that is currently in storage containers. We need to move that back into the classrooms, and that is going to be a tremendous undertaking, and that will be impossible to do if we're transitioning to a new company. As far as pricing goes, this current school year, the yearly cost was $1,853,237. The proposed cost for next year, this coming year, is $1,906,874, which is a 2.9% increase. However, we are reducing 10 WFF positions because those are becoming Rittner positions, and that will be $336,000 less, for a total of $1,570,874. In January of 2022, there's going to be a minimum wage increase of 85 cents. And this could increase the monthly rate if every single person received an 85-cent raise, which is unlikely to happen. Not everybody would receive an 85-cent raise. It would just be to bring them to at least the minimum wage of $11.15 an hour. However, potentially it could raise the monthly rate up to $8,000. If that were to happen, then it would increase the total yearly cost for custodial services to $1,618,000 Therefore, I am recommending that the board approve a one-year extension for custodial services by WFF Facility Services for the 2021-2022 school year for a cost not to exceed $1,618,874. Do you have questions for me or for Todd?
Do we have a minimum staffing requirement? Do we have in our contract or agreement anywhere that we will have so many people in our building?
We have a designated number of staff per building. Night cleaners, this many at the high school, day cleaners, this many at the high school. And that goes for every single one of the buildings.
Do we know the percentage of how many days or weeks do we meet that staffing?
I don't have that, Brad, but the staffing over this past year, because that was an issue last year when we got the one-year extension. And so what WFF has done by putting Todd in place, increasing oversight, they have also increased the support that their headquarters gives to hiring. So their human resources department, and I've seen the communications between them and between the leaders here in the district. They are constantly feeding them candidates in order so that they can keep that hiring pool going. And so, we all know that custodial work is a high turnover job. And so as something drops off, we expect that to happen. The replacement is happening very quickly. So, where that wasn't happening as quickly before this time last year, we made our voices heard last year, and that extra support has been, forthcoming this entire school year.
There's a question that was asked, Mike. So those additional positions that are Rittenour positions, what's the timeline for onboarding those staff members?
So I have started the interview process. And so next month I'll be recommending two. I'm actually making the recommendations to Human Resources. Made that today. Have other interviews this week. And so again, that's a process. I've worked with Todd and I've worked with Reagan in order to look at the existing WFF employees that are the highest quality. Not all of them will likely be hired. However, majority of them may, because they're happy to allow us to hire their very best. And so we're not going to hire into those positions in order just to place somebody into that position. We want to make sure that whoever goes into those positions is of high quality, because they're going to be with us for a long time.
So we're moving ahead with intention. So those positions will be on board as soon as is prudent. We're not waiting until July or after.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another thing that, Todd has accommodated is that as we hire now, as soon as that person onboards, then credit will be given to this past 1-year extension. So that person's wages will be deducted from our current monthly statement.
Thank you.
These Brittner positions, they're not solely supervisory positions, correct?
No, that's correct. So there's a distinction there because, we have, a company, WFF and Brittner employees. So, we're not supervising, another company's employees. However, there is the expectation that there's coordination. And so there is a nighttime WFF supervisor. And that for the entire district, and that position is going to continue. And therefore that person will be directly supervising the WFF employees. but the Ritenour custodian will be coordinating the cleaning, doing a lot of what the leads are doing now, except they won't be directly supervising. So dividing up the cleaning duties for the night, checking at the end of the night, making sure that rooms are clean, that the quality control, they're going to be responsible for that. We really believe that that's going to improve the cleaning even more than it has over the past year.
So then with that quality check, would they be able to call that WFF employee back over and say, this needs to be redone?
Yeah. I mean, it's a matter of walking through, and it's just like, here are some things that were missed, and so that's that coordination. They wouldn't be responsible for any discipline of an employee. That would be handled by the WFF supervisor.
So one other question that was given was, are we paying a set price regardless if they're fully staffed or not? So like if we don't have people show up, we're not paying for those people that don't show up. We're only paying the hourly for people that do.
No, so the contract is the contract. And so when we commit to the contract, that's the price that we pay. It's not if a person is absent, that portion is deducted. We're paying the full contracted price.
Okay. And are the openings that we have available, are they out on the Brittner website?
Yes, they are. Sorry, I hogged up a lot of the questions and Todd probably could have answered them. So.
I'm sure he doesn't mind.
We just appreciate the opportunity, the partnership, the collaboration. It's been nothing but a joy to work with Mr. Smith and his team. We truly feel like we're a part of the Brittner family, and we appreciate that level of collaboration. So thank you very much.
Mike, in regards to Mrs. Wellness's question, can you talk about the credit and the last year that the amount will go up like
So when we talk about staffing across our entire portfolio in the industry that we're in, staffing is a challenge. And what we've done for Brittner as we've looked back on it, working with Mr. Smith and his team, is as we see that there's a huge discrepancy or a large discrepancy in staffing, we made the adjustment and we credited back Brittner this year $90,000 in the delta between actual and budgeted staffing dollars. We felt that that was fair and equitable. And then this year, going from this January 1st till the end of June, we're going to go ahead and we're going to absorb the minimum wage increase. We're not going to try and ask or request to pass that along to the district. We're going to go ahead and absorb that again this year.
So though staffing has improved over 2020, remember 2019, was an issue. And so Todd and his team went back and looked at the discrepancy and credited that amount back.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam President, I move that we approve a one-year extension for custodial services by WFF Facility Services for the 2021-2022 school year for a cost not to exceed $1,618,874. As presented.
Second. I have a motion and a second. If there's no other questions, I'll call the vote.
Yeah.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Clever Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Greco? And Mr. Garden? And I will vote yes. Ms. Greco is a yes. And Mr. Garden is a yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.
Thanks, Reagan.
Oh, you get to stay there. 3.03, we have our Shapus Arena contract.
All right, so striving for our goal of graduating 100% of students helps meet our mission and vision. And our commitment to equity will help reach the goal of graduating all students. I don't have a presentation, I'm just going to present. Rittner graduation ceremonies are held at Shapus Arena at St. Louis University. We've been doing that since 2013. Of course, we're all sad that last year's ceremonies were canceled. We are all sad about that, and I don't think it measures to the disappointment of the actual 2020 graduates and their families. Graduation ceremonies for the 2021 school year are scheduled for Saturday, June 5th, and that is at 6 o'clock. June 5th is a Saturday after Memorial Day, and we've reserved Shapus and the practice courts for graduation staging. Last year, you approved extending our contract with Shapus for 2022, and the graduation date in 2022 is Saturday, June 4th. And in order to reserve this venue for 2023, I'm requesting that the board allow us to hold the date of Saturday, June 3rd, 2023, the Saturday immediately following Memorial Day for our graduation ceremonies.
Question. It was asked of me today, an individual that wanted to know more about this, and he was asking about 2020. We had a date in May, and then we also tried to get a date in August. And the question was, even though we had it reserved and we didn't use it. So just to be clear, our cost for those reserved dates was
transferred to this year. So
it didn't cost us anything.
Zero.
Okay. So we didn't use the date, we just had the reservation.
That's correct.
Okay. That was the question.
They moved the last year's deposit. They just credited that and gave it to us for this year.
Very good.
We're just responsible for the remainder of that.
Okay. So it just moved that forward.
Pardon me?
We just moved our deposit and everything forward to the next year.
That's correct.
Okay. Madam President, I move that we approve the Shapus Arena contract extension through June 3rd, 2023, as presented this night.
I second. I have a motion and a second. Any other questions? I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lewis? Yes. Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Glover-Jones?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Ms. Greco and Ms. DeGarden? Ms. DeGarden is a yes. And Ruth asked that we please state that we were not charged for last year. Oh, and we have recently paid for, I think, 2021. So we haven't paid for anything. The deposit from last year was moved to this year, correct?
Yes. So last year's deposit, so they do their deposits in a rate of 2. So they moved last year's deposit over. There will be another deposit that is due. And that's $3,500. And then the remainder after that right there will be $7,000. The remainder will be due after the ceremony.
Okay.
think we're in a little bit of a delay, so.
No problem.
I'll wait for Ruth to come through, and then I will let Michelle know. She's a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Moving on to 3.04, we have our exploring performance contractors with Mr. Lindhorst.
Give me a second.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening.
So tonight I want to discuss performance contractors and another procurement method. So we have our district vision and mission. And as Mike said, our facilities relating to our equity statement is facilities should provide the best physical environment for learning to occur. And all district schools should provide consistent and equitable environments. So one procurement method that we currently use is referred to as design, bid, build, be a traditional method, whereas the district pays an architect and engineers to design a project that we want and create detailed construction drawings. Those are then advertised as a request for bids. The drawings are available for general contractors to study and develop their bids. And then we get hard bids. Hard bids meaning that cost is the cost. They're received by the district. Board of Education approves the lowest, most acceptable bid, and a contract is entered into. Another procurement method, though, in the state is design build through use of performance contractors. This is where the performance contractor develops and designs the project based on the district objectives, requirements, and our input. The performance contractor receives costs and sometimes hard bids from other subcontractors that they want to use or that the district wants to use. And then we enter into a contract with the performance contractor. So this procurement method has been allowed by state statute since '97. At first, it was mainly used related to replacing heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, lighting upgrades, or retrofits and other savings items. And then those energy savings were used to fund the project. But the statute actually allows the method for three different kinds of savings. One is energy savings. One is operational savings, such as reducing your repairs and maintenance costs due to replacing that old HVAC equipment or repairing buildings. And also you can avoid future capital costs by working on buildings with significant renovations or even additions. The statute does require a competitive selection process. It's not a request for bids, but it's a request for qualifications. And so firms will submit their qualifications, we interview them, we go through an evaluation process. We can qualify more than one performance contractor if we want, or we can just use one. And then we can assign projects to one performance contractor or more than one performance contractor, different projects to different performance contractors. Originally, when this method started, it was really usually a subsidiary or a representative of large air conditioning and heating equipment manufacturers, such as Honeywell or Trane. They would either have a representative or they'd create another company that was a performance contractor. And as you can guess, they really would just look at their own equipment. They didn't look at different manufacturers. Now, most performance contractors are independent. They're not associated with any one manufacturer, and they look at the best solution for each project. And it's really used for all types of projects now. as I said, you can do additions, significant renovations, where it didn't really start out that way. So a performance contractor is similar to a general contractor. Again, they can receive hard bids from various subcontractors. The district can name certain subcontractors that we want them to use. For instance, if we have a plumber or electrical contractor or a HVAC contractor that we use all the time, we might say, well, we want you to get a cost from them and only them. But the performance contractor is responsible for coordinating and completing the work. The difference between that and the design bid build or a general contractor is that the performance contractor designs and develops that project in conjunction with an architect, because they still need sealed and signed drawings in order to get permits. The performance contractor then is responsible for the entire project from design through the completion of the work. And the performance contractor assumes the risk of unforeseen circumstances or unforeseen conditions. And therefore, usually there are no change orders on this kind of a contract, because instead of the district assuming the risk of those unforeseen conditions, the performance contractor does. So again, the advantages to a performance contractor: they assume risk, no change orders. It's usually a little more efficient and a faster approach because the performance contractor is responsible and their profit or loss is on the line. Less supervision by district personnel is needed. In my experience, we only had to have maybe monthly, maybe every 6 weeks meetings, whereas as Mike knows now, we have a weekly meeting when there's a general contractor involved, just to make sure that everything's moving along. Again, the district can specify wanted subcontractors. The performance contractor is fully responsible. There's nobody else to blame because they've designed it. And again, in my experience, there's usually less problems during a project. The couple disadvantages is, again, there's no hard bids from competitors to compare the cost. So we decide the project, the performance contractor comes up with that cost. We analyze it, we may negotiate a little bit, but in the end, we don't have a hard number to compare with somebody else, unless we actually ask 2 performance contractors to do the same work. Usually that is not the way a performance contractor will work, because they will do all the design and the development up front at no risk to us, because we don't sign a contract until their design and the cost is finished. And so normally those performance contractors aren't going to do that work if they are competing against somebody else. But again, we can choose 2 different projects with 2 different performance contractors and compare their work and their timeliness and everything else through that method. So it may cost more for oversight and profit, but again, it may cost less because of the lack of change orders. It's very, the only disadvantage really is it's really hard to quantify whether the cost that we're paying is the least cost or not. That's really the only disadvantage of these. But again, in my experience, the project usually has less problems and gets done a little more efficiently through this method. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
And so board members, the reason we're bringing this to you tonight, there's a number of Proposition S projects that are going to be in the pipeline. And so just Dwight has experience with this approach, and again, doing the work, it doesn't always have to be done the way that it's always been done. And the way that the work has always been done in Ritenour around project work is not through the use of performance contractors. So I was excited to learn about this process because I was not aware of it either, and to get your reaction as well.
Sounds like a general contractor.
Is that your perspective?
Yes, except that the big difference is, again, the performance contractor has designed and developed the whole project, and it's really their baby, quote unquote, their baby, their project. And they are assuming the risk. If they have problems or if it takes longer than they anticipated, it's their money. It's not, sometimes, depending on the general contractor, you can have them look for change orders because they may blame the drawings, they may blame weather, they may blame the people that are the county or whoever is inspecting, or a fire marshal who requires something. So usually they have done more homework, in my experience, than sometimes with a general contractor project, a design bid build project, because it's really their butts on the line. And so that's where the real value comes in.
So do we have any examples of people maybe around us that have done it and the success that they've had have had with it?
Yeah, well, so my experience in another district, but our friends to the west did this a couple of years ago. They actually, Ritenour, the chief financial officer of Pattonville, they qualified 2, and then they gave them different projects. And I haven't spoken to him since. They were pleased with both of them. And I don't know now if they've whittled it down to one performance contractor that they're doing it with, but they are using performance contractors when they had a bond issue a couple of years ago.
So this would be then taking the place of the architect we're using right now?
It could.
It could. We could use a different architect, but again, we choose the architect basically that we want the performance contractor to work with. So we can continue to use our current architect and certain engineers. Again, they're usually mechanical engineers themselves, but they also can have electrical engineers or structural engineers. But we can say who we want them to use, because again, they have to have architects and engineers that sign and seal drawings in order to get permits. So
I guess I asked a question because the architectural group that we've been using, we've had for a very long time. And they know, what we want to look like. They know what our buildings think, how we want to present ourselves. What do they think of this performance contractor? Have anybody talked to them?
no, I have not talked to them. I have not talked to Doug Kuba at this point.
If they have any experience with this, what's their feedback on that? I'd really like to know what their ideas and thoughts about this are, because I would think that we would pick them to be our architects. And if their opinion would weigh heavily on what direction we would go. They came back and gave them glowing reports, or they came back and said that's a disaster, it'd be good to know.
So the process of issuing an RFQ and a request for qualifications and interviewing performance contractors, there is no liability to the district until the board's ready to approve a contract, and that would be after design and development and costs will come up with. So this is a process. So if the board gives a go ahead and issue an RFQ and go through that process, we can discuss that with the architect. There's nothing, again, you're not incurring any cost tonight if you approve moving forward with an RFQ process. That's down the line several months, really.
And I think you talked to us about this actually before. I do remember us having conversations about it. And it was even stated that, we could use it on a project and see how that goes compared to another one. So it's
Absolutely. So in Proposition S, we're going to do quite a bit of heating and ventilation and air conditioning work, which includes replacing piping in the schools. But each of those schools could be its own project. And so we can do a larger project, we can do a smaller project to begin with. We can do 2 smaller projects using 2 different performance contractors. It's really how, it's really the district is in control of how all of that happens, because again, they'll do all the design and development work at no cost to the district. And then you don't approve a contract until we're ready to approve a project.
Well, I definitely think it's something that we should consider and look at it, because, it's always good to look outside the box and see if there's better ways to do things.
There was a question that came in. If the quality of the project ends up being poor or subpar, with a performance contractor, are court costs that the district would incur eliminated?
No, that would be the same as on a general contractor. Depending on the contract, some contracts would have an arbitration clause or a mediation clause, or at least a mediation clause. I mean, there's three different processes. First, you would go through mediation, trying to have a mediator come to some agreement with the parties. You can have arbitration, where you pick either one or 3 arbitrators, and that's binding arbitration, or you can go to a court. So any of those processes can be in a contract. They would be the same for a general contractor design bid build, or through a design build with a performance contract.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but I'm open to it.
Does everybody feel comfortable with having Dwight move ahead with this?
I think we need to move forward with it, and maybe designate a pilot project of some kind that we can oversee and see how it works, take it step by step, see how it turns out.
And it sounds like a good plan, because with as many projects as we have, I think that'll make it more efficient.
Yes, and at some point, Mr. Smith is going to not be able to oversee all of these projects that we're talking about with Proposition S, as anyone would not be able to, not just Mike.
Until we get comfortable with that contractor in that group, that's still going to have the oversight, right?
Yes. However, that again, that is one of the advantages of using a performance contractor. In my experience, again, if you have a good performance contractor, it will require much less oversight, because again, it's their money on the line, as opposed to being able to. They don't have 3 to 4 parties to point the finger at, such as when a general contractor, and nothing against general contractors, but when you have that design bid build, you have architects, you have engineers, you have authorities having jurisdiction, would be the county inspectors or the fire marshals, which we run into all the time. All of them, or the architect, where they're saying, that wasn't on I didn't price that wall because that wall's not shown on the drawing. The performance contractor, when they say, well, that wall's not shown on the drawing, they're out of luck. That's the beauty of, that is one of the main things. It's their project. So you really usually don't have problems, because they really do a lot of work up front and at no cost to us. It's sometimes, as I'm talking, I know sometimes it sounds too good to be true. But that is how it works. Again, sometimes it's hard to quantify, well, what was the cost of all of that? But I think until you go through the process, it's hard to it's really hard to weigh the difference between a traditional method and this procurement method. So
I wouldn't mind going, like I said, having a pilot project and walking through it, maybe having comparables where we can see if we save money or we spent more money.
And
Or
that,
it came even.
yeah, and that was a question that came in also, just getting some testimonials from some other districts that have gone with this route. So we've got it from Pattonville. So if there is support from the board with moving ahead, then we'll also work to get some testimonials from some other districts that have done this work too.
That'd be great.
We're trying it once.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
thank you. Moving on to 3.05, we have our program evaluation with Dr. Stewart.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Perfect.
So I am presenting and providing an overview and highlights for our program evaluations for in the curriculum and instruction department. Brittner School District works in collaboration with parents and the community to develop leaders who will become productive citizens that lead lives with personal integrity. The mission of Brittner School District is to ensure all students think critically, solve problems, and learn in a nurturing environment that prepares them for success in a diverse global society. And this ties to our equity statement with our trauma-informed practices, which we have implemented in our district-wide. We've had professional development on utilizing a trauma-informed approach, and we've embedded our teaching and interactions with students that focus on building positive relationships with students and viewing our students and our educating students with a trauma-informed lens. We keep this in mind when researching best practices and writing curriculum to ensure all students have equitable access to resources that are embracing all cultures when we are writing curriculum and teaching our students. We will continue to work on customizing and supplementing the curriculum to reflect the cultures, traditions, backgrounds, and interests of our student population. Again, this presentation provides highlights and an overview of the academic programs within the curriculum and instruction department in Ritenour School District. I will also provide information on the potential business impact to Ritenour School District, and more specific information and details you will have that in May. With our first core content area, ELA, last year, our Board of Education approved our new ELA resource, Being a Reader, for our kindergarten through third grade students and specific authentic text for our 9th and 10th grade students within their reading and writing units. Teachers wrote ELA curriculum in grades K through 3, embedding Being a Reader resources, and our 9th and 10th grade teachers are writing curriculum aligned to our ELA standards. 4th and 5th grade teachers receive PD, our professional development on reading conferences. This year, we have scheduled several meetings with our ELA committee to continue to collaborate on 4th and 5th grade resources that will support individual reading conferences, Making Meaning, which is the resource that the committee identified for reading comprehension last year, and Being a Reader. Our 9th and 10th grade classes have received some authentic and diverse texts and have discussed a PD plan for this year on using multicultural text. ELA teachers in our middle schools have been piloting Engaged New York with positive feedback on the curriculum resource. There will be ongoing meetings with our ELA teachers in elementary, middle, and high school to identify the preferred resource that's aligned to our Missouri learning standards. Pre-K would like professional development and some big books to support pre-kindergarten and ELA content. And we will work with ELA teachers in 11th and 12th grade on their ELA needs. 11th and 12th grade proposal will be discussed next year, May 2022. We plan to have a summer writing ELA committee for kindergarten through 5th and 9th and 10th grade. There is coaching support in each building. We also have Ywca online math, which is a math program. Well, it has ELA too, but we're focusing mostly on math to help really reinforce and provide some practice for our students on some priority standards in math. I'm sorry. Now I'm back here. So our teachers and students have been excited about the use of this resource and the ability to provide opportunities for our students to practice the skill. That's really tailored to each student. It's personalized for each student. As it relates to math, we will continue to revise our curriculum based on data, teacher feedback, and the priority standards. We will continue coaching. A lot of our coaching this year has been focused on distance learning with creating online assessment resources for teachers, really giving teachers feedback on online instruction, really creating modules. Teachers have been involved in that as well, the teachers in our curriculum and instruction department, which really aligns our priority standards to our curriculum with at-home learning assignments for students. Our instructional coaches also support the differentiation for teachers in the classroom with small groups and one-on-one instruction. We also have common assessments that have been developed and extended through grades 1 through 6 and Algebra 1, which helps teachers track growth on students' achievement. It also helps teachers monitor the progress and the strategies that they have implemented. Many of our coaches have transferred many of these assessments to online assessments using Google Forms or Edulastic, which is another program that you can use to create online assessments and administer a test and view performance data. Our first and second semester modules are complete. We asked teachers for feedback after the first semester modules, and our teachers wanted some more information, like on pacing. So we created a pacing guide for the beginning of each module to help provide some information for teachers. Teachers were concerned about the loss of instructional time, so we took that into consideration in creating these modules as well. We have coaching in all of our elementary, middle, and high school, and coaching support has focused on the implementation and support in our PLCs, implementation of the module curriculum resources, coaching new curriculum resources in ELA, analyzing and monitoring data, meeting and supporting building goals by meeting with principals, following through on action plans in each building. And our coaches have also aligned our priority standards to Ywca as well. We will continue to also support the use of our step-up units that are used at the end of the year to provide exposure to that next skill and that next grade. Students, as it relates to science, are engaging in lessons that provide hands-on learning experiences for students and opportunities to apply engineering and scientific concepts and processes to their learning. We have integrated informative reading and writing in our ELA modules. The C&I department collaborates with Msba on professional development materials that are needed to help support teachers across the district. Msba has also tweaked the plan to help teachers while they're learning online with distance learning by creating videos for teachers for support for professional development. Our partnership with Washington University has also been helpful in supporting the needs of our science teachers with Msba materials. Earth and space science will receive continued support during second semester. We will continue to support the efforts on notebooking. That is still important. And that's usually professional development that we've had every year. But this year, during the pandemic, we have more pressing needs that we've been focusing on with technology and creating these modules for our teachers. We are also excited to have coaching support in our middle school science classes. The focus has been on curriculum needs, Msba, data-driven instruction, and the data team cycle. Our modules were written by teachers and coaches and members of C&I department, like I've said before. And because of the limited instructional time, social studies and science articles were embedded in our ELA modules to help students to have an opportunity to learn science and social studies concepts in their ELA and ELA instruction as well. Our government curriculum has been revised to include rigorous common assessments, scoring guides, and social studies concepts aligned to our Missouri learning standards. And it's also aligned to our ELA skills. Data-driven instruction has been emphasized to meet the needs of all students. The timeline for the review and revision of social studies will be next year. And opportunities that exist to support the implementation of social studies concepts will be through the collaboration of new ideas, resources, and curriculum that's aligned to our standards and our shared vision in Brittner School District. Social studies teachers have asked for professional development centered around summative assessments as well. Career and technical education. Staff completed the Perkins 5 needs assessment, which is you have to complete that every year in order to get funding from Perkins grant. And our CTE department completes this common criteria and quality indicator process, which really emphasized the need to work on improving the outcomes for our industry recognized credentials. They call them IRCs, which recognizes students who have successfully demonstrated skill competencies in a core set of content and performance standards in a specific set of work-related tasks for CTE. Our current concentrators, the students that are concentrators, 4.9% of our students have earned an IRC. So they've identified that as an area of opportunity for our students. Brittner School District has 114 students participating in work-based learning opportunities this year. Last year was 176 for first semester. Our curriculum review and revision starts this year for CTE. And this year we'll focus on developing a shared vision that is aligned to our Brittner School District's mission and vision. We will examine best practices and standards, and next year the committee will dig deeper by examining our standards, resources, and we will revise our CTE curriculum. We also have a Project Lead the Way starter course this year, which is really focusing on helping our students with math. All students don't have to take it, but it is a support for students who may need that. We have about 49 students in that class. There are 2 St. Louis Community College dual credit courses that the Brittner High School has proposed. Intermediate algebra, which originally last year we had trigonometry and algebra 3, which was a combined course. Next year, they want to separate that and have algebra 3, which is really intermediate algebra. They want to separate the trigonometry and algebra 3. Also, introduction to mass communication. The high school would like to add that course as well. Mr. Schuler, our assistant principal at Brittner High School, supports students who qualify for a CTE certification. And the CTE certification is intended to provide students with the necessary technical skills to be prepared for an entry-level career or additional training in a technical field. And there's a criteria that has to be met for a student to receive a CTE certificate. Our library media program embeds STEAM and makerspace experiences for our elementary students. And our library media specialists integrate ELA priority standards during library classes. And also they are typically our leaders in technology, and we also go to them for support in that area. Our PE teachers have implemented the Fitness Grant program, which supports goal setting and tracking physical fitness assessment data for students. And then PE teachers, they've asked for more professional development on using this program and tracking this data, and also they would like more technology. PE equipment needs were discussed last year with the intention of continuing that conversation this year. And they will be meeting tomorrow to follow up on that. We will continue to promote our music extravaganza, which provides an opportunity for our 5th grade students to be exposed to new instruments, musical groups to aid them in selecting which ensemble they would like to enroll in for the next school year. Middle school teachers created videos last year for incoming 6th graders to expose students to classes they can participate in at the middle school level. Performing arts teachers have asked for professional development, focusing on distance learning protocols and instructional practices aligned to standards. The music department at Brittner High School has requested a new course called The Voice. This class has no prerequisite. It's open to all students who wish to learn to sing better with their vocal potential and work specifically on solos to perform. In visual arts, we will continue to support choice and mixed media art for students across the district. Our teachers have asked for professional development that focuses on the creation and use of formative assessments. Also, Ms. Gilliam, our coordinator for professional development, purchased an online PD platform for our art teachers called the Art of Education. It was requested by the art teachers in the district, and it contains professional development and curricular resources for teachers aligned to our Missouri standards. Feedback from our world language teachers centers around the importance of developing courses for native speakers of Spanish to better accommodate the needs of native speakers of Spanish and support their bilingual progression. It's also important to increase the number of students that show proficiency in English and another language by starting early learning another language. So that is encouraged in the middle school to learn another language early. Also, we want to increase the seal of biliteracy achievement for our students, which is awarded to graduating high school students who have demonstrated achievement in English and a language other than English. And they also have to learn about their cultural, that culture as well. 20 students earned this level of achievement last year. And to provide a really overview of the students that are learning on Edgenuity, which is our online program, we have 10 students and they're in 11th and 12th grade. And there has been 13 requests for students to attend like MOCAP, Missouri Course Access and Virtual School Program. But this year, earlier in the year, 3 students have come back because parents have said they wanted to come back to Brittner. And actually, after I completed this report, we've had 3 more students this week that their families are asking to come back. So that's kind of a testament to the things we're doing in Brittner as well.
So Dr. Stewart, to push on that just a little bit. So those families were in the full virtual MOCAP program, and then they came back to the full virtual Brittner program?
Yes. So we already had 3 that came back, and then received an email this week on 3 more that want to come back. So we usually reach out to the previous provider, to the parents, and try to, develop a plan for their success in New Britain. So in summation, we will continue to build staff capacity. We know that that's important, but we also know that the outcomes for students are important as well. So we want to continue to track that as well. Budget implications for ELA. You'll receive a request for being a writer and making meaning. You will receive a request for that at the end in May for that. And then also for next year, ELA resources for 11th and 12th grade, and also CTE resources for next year in May. Because we're going through the process this year for review and revision for CTE this year, but we're not looking at resources this year, we're looking at resources next year. So do you have any questions? I know that was long. Sorry.
I think it was maybe a year ago, Dr. LaChance gave us an overview like this, that through about a year ago.
Yes.
And on more than a few slides, he had the same comments that you have, that we need staff development for these different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And a year later, I see that on your presentation.
Well, I think.
Have we done any staff development to meet these needs between now and then? Because it's, if we sit here a year from now and we see a nicely built presentation like this, and it'll say in there embedded somewhere, we still need staff development. The staff is asking for staff development for these things. I'm wondering how or if we are meeting that need.
On developing the staff?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a continuous goal. I think we always continue to meet the needs of our staff, but I think we also are talking about data informing instruction. We want to make sure that what we're doing is working. So we should have processes in place in our buildings and the district-wide to make sure that what we're doing is working. So data should inform instruction. I think one major thing that we've done this year is I really think that the modules have been very, very helpful. I've seen and I hear teachers, administrators talking about how aligned our students are with what they've learned. And there's common assessments that have been built like throughout elementary and middle with Algebra 1 as well. So I think we continue to work on professional development, but we also look at the outcomes to make sure what we're doing is working.
Well, but like I said, a year ago, I saw the same program saying there is a need for staff development. And I see it again this year, and I see in your summation, it says continued professional staff development is needed. I agree. I was just asking what steps, if any, have we taken to do that? Easy answer is we've been working on that continuously. We've done that 4 or 5 different times, but I don't know that because I don't know what we're doing during staff development. But I see this last year, I see this year. I understand the ongoing process, but are we making strides to meet that need?
Yeah, so Dr. Thomas, just as we have a focus on every student learning every day, we also have a focus on staff learning. And one example is the technology proficiencies, and that this year was much greater focus on tech proficiencies and tech competencies. And as we reported out to the board back in November, we still had a ways to go on our 5 tech competencies. So we're coming back to the board to present the outcomes. Ms. Gilliam is going to do that. But we have an update now that Kratz Elementary is our first school that has 100% of staff meeting all 5 tech competencies. And then we monitor the percent complete for each of the 5 tech competencies. We're up to 90%, north of 90% for competency number 1. And then for competency number 5, which I think was at 9%, when we reported to the board in November, that competency is north of 65% at this point. So some of the learning that we're doing along the way too, there are some staff members that have received feedback that, because you have to produce artifacts to show competencies, there's been the perception among staff members that that's just another thing that I have to do because I possess these competencies, but yet I have to establish that portfolio to demonstrate to teacher leaders and administrators that I possess them. I see that as not a growth mindset. People are busy and people are working very hard. And so for the artifacts to demonstrate tech competencies, I think the fact that it's being perceived in a certain way by some shows that we do have a ways to go. Like I can tell you what I know and I can tell you, but when I have to show you, sometimes adults feel a certain kind of way of having to show you evidence of what skills I possess. It can be perceived as micromanaging. It can be perceived as a number of different things. We're just saying we need to have evidence so that we can report, well, we didn't say this, but it could be perceived as evidence because if the Board of Education asks me to say 65% of staff are competent in competency number 5, well, how do you know that? We've got portfolios that are electronic in nature that we have on file to back all that up. So professional learning and staff competency, staff capacity building, that is a given and that's ongoing. But the what or the focus shifts. This year has been so much around distance learning and tech competencies, but it's also around the learning modules because we knew in a virtual environment, we weren't going to be able to cover the same amount of content as we were before. So Dr. Stewart and teams of teachers pared it all back. And there was professional learning that was connected in that. What is in those learning modules? What are those priority standards? And that's another part too. Priority standards can change from year to year based on student outcomes on the assessments. Maybe one year it's standard, non-standard units of measurement. Maybe, and based on the student assessments, maybe students score really well against that standard. So then next year, the focus changes. And maybe next year, we're going to have a heavier focus on a different math standard. So you have to build capacity to make sure that teachers can be right for kids. So I think, a lot of words there, but just the idea of having a growth mindset. People are always in a continuous process of growth, but also there has to be accountability for outcomes. Because that's the end of professional learning is to improve student learning outcomes. And we've got a ways to go there.
Dr. Stewart, I have a question about the dual credit courses that are those courses that, are you saying that they would be taught actually at here or that they would actually be at the community college?
So the dual credit are taught here and dual enrollment is taught at St. Louis Community College.
Okay, thank you for that. I always get the two mixed up. How that is. So thank you for that. How many teachers do we have that are certified to teach college courses?
So I think that would be a Dr. LaChan's question. So do you know off the top of your head the number of staff certified to teach St. Louis Community College?
Not off the top of my head. I would prefer to some guidance.
I was just wondering.
I can get that in the Friday memo tomorrow.
0 to 10, 10 to 20, 100.
So we started off with 6. I don't want 6 teachers. I don't want to misspeak. I'll get that number in the.
Thank you. The reason I say that, I've been trying to talk to a lot of kids about those opportunities because they didn't know that those were opportunities. And so just trying to push them towards that.
I will say I did notice a bigger push this year from teachers, even just like sending out emails to students that were enrolled in those classes. prior to school year to say, hey, just so you know, this class is offered. Also, can you get dual credit? So.
And it has increased, yeah, over the years here. It has increased substantially. The number of courses.
I do think that is, we have two things happening. We do have staff that are certified, but students may not sign up for the class because they may not know about it, may not be interested. So it's multifaceted. Take a look at the current schedule and look at how many people currently are certified and have students in the class.
I mean, I think we probably could talk to the students when they're signing up in the spring for these classes versus in the fall, like when they're already enrolled. A student may be more apt to take a class if they know that they can get the dual credit, or a parent may be able to encourage the child to take that class. Those conversations are held when the students are making their schedules. Just a quick question. I know you mentioned that the pacing modules, that's been helpful to staff. And forgive me, this may have been talked about on something that I've read, but I can't recall right now. Have we heard from the state if there's gonna be any adjustments as far as like the expectations? I know like assessments are we're not being held accountable so much for assessments, but are there adjustments overall in what that looks like as far as what students should be learning by a certain time frame?
Well, that's interesting you said that because I was in a meeting yesterday and they were talking about the standards, the priority standards they've identified, but they're on draft form. Is that kind of what you're talking about? They're supposed to be approved in April. So we're going to have to really look at that in the summer to make sure that our priority standards are aligned with the priority standards from the state because they're just finishing that up. So I don't think that we have less standards to meet, but we just have to look at the standards that they've identified as priority standards because students will be assessed on those standards next year.
And also board members, it was confirmed this week, there will be state assessments this spring. It was confirmed that that is going to happen. Those assessments do have to be administered in person in buildings. A question that I asked was around a level not determined, because right now there are triggers in place where if beyond a certain percent of students do not take the assessment or do not take the assessment or do not complete the assessment, it's considered level not determined. If you go beyond a certain threshold, it invalidates the assessments in that content area. So those are ongoing questions that we're asking the state because the state has said the assessments this year will not be used for district accountability purposes. So in terms of accreditation status, but it would be used because we're making a transition into MSIP 6. And so there's always a 3-year rolling average process that's a part of those state assessments. So we're still looking to get more clarity around that. There's been a whole lot of advocacy in the region around postponing those state assessments like was done last spring. The only thing that would cause that to happen at this point is if the federal government would step in and give states a waiver from those state assessments. If that would happen, then DESE would go along with it, but that's not likely to happen. So, all of the assessment scores, they would get reported in the papers, they would get reported to the media, but they would not be built into accreditation. And so that's a concern. I understand the reason for needing to know where every student is in their learning, but you don't need the state assessment to do that. Right. We have Evaluate, we have IXL, we have common formative assessments that Dr. Stewart talked about. We have a number of other ways to measure that. And we have shared that information with DESE. We are accountable to know where kids are. Every district in the county and throughout the Ed Plus footprint, which is, I think, 78 school districts did the same thing. So it is an ongoing conversation. I don't think anything is going to change. So I think the, MAP is going to be with us in April and May.
Thank you for that.
Sure, sure.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to 3.06, we have our appointment of student representatives on the Board of Education. Dr. Kilbright?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Lonis. And so board members, there are two candidates for the student representative to the Board of Education. So Kayla Baker is the first in the history of the organization. Kayla is going to be graduating this June and moving on to a college of her choice. So the thinking is we would work to seat the next incoming student representative to the Board of Education. If you select the student tonight, we would follow through then and work with Ms. Lonis to notify the student of his or her selection. And then that student would be seated at the business meeting in February. So with the two candidates, they were sent out to you through email. The names are left off so that it's an anonymous process. There's candidate number 1 and candidate number 2. So board members were asked to make their selection. And so tonight, we would ask you to list your choice, either candidate 1 or candidate 2. And we'll ask Ms. Clover to keep a tally. And then if there is a clear selection, then Michelle or I would call out that student's name, and then we'd follow through with that process of letting the student know, letting her or him know of the selection. Any questions about that?
Was I supposed to receive an email, or is this?
So no, the student rep is selected by the board,
Gotcha,
the seated elected board members. Yeah,
I would like to hear your opinion on the two.
I do not know who they are. But is that okay if I do that?
Yeah, so as long as names are left out of it.
Oh, well, I know one person who did apply, and try not to be too specific. I've worked with one of them really personally, and I know that they would do very well in this position. One of my shortcomings is that I can be kind of shy, and especially for the first few months that I was here. But this person is not. I 100% believe that they would walk into this room and not have any issues with presenting their opinions, and they're also just very well educated on social justice, and I've worked with them on that level a lot. So yeah, I think that's all I can say without getting too terribly specific, but there is a good candidate in there for sure.
Okay.
Can I ask which one that
No,
you
you can't.
recommend?
No.
I didn't ask for a name, I just asked for a recommendation.
I would say no, because then that's
Because,
her putting.
and Kayla hasn't seen the essays.
That's a resource that we had back then used to vet this out. So truly reading both of these documents, it seems like they're lacking in a lot of, I don't know, enthusiasm or whatever you call it. Maybe they were just very good put together. I'm not sure how to put it out there.
So
I wonder if we did a good job getting this out to where we only had 2 candidates as well.
Yeah, so working with Doug Bray in the Community Services Department, we put this out. We put this out before winter break. It was pushed out knowing that over winter break there would be the opportunity for people to be thoughtful. And I also want to be mindful of the fact not to lessen or cheapen the role. There's a lot going on in the lives of children and families right now, and I think that's valid. This year as compared to some other years. So I think that might be at play.
So will you call the roll, or do you want me to call the roll?
That's fine. I can just ask each person.
Okay, because I have the other twos.
Okay, so let's start with the two that you have.
So Ruth selected number 1 and Penny selected number 1.
Dr. Thomas?
I would select number 1 as well.
Okay. Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, based on the feedback that they've given in their essay, I too select number 1.
Okay. Ms. Lewis?
I select number 1.
Dr. Ellen Wilson?
Number 1.
I would actually
select number 2.
Okay. Okay, so obviously we have 6-1 for candidate number 1. Candidate number 1 is Janiyah Scott. And so then we would look for a motion to select Ms. Scott as the student representative to the Board of Education.
I move that we select Janiyah Scott to serve as a student representative to the Board of Education.
I have a motion.
Second?
I have a second. I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones? Yes?
I mean, technically, no, but it's already passed.
So did you want to pass or no? I didn't hear what you said.
I said no.
Okay.
Sorry.
Ruth?
Have to talk about what
Ruth and Penny are a yes.
Okay.
And I will vote a yes.
Now, can I ask?
It was not, but I believe she voted very well regardless.
I do think that we need to refine it. You know, without knowing anything about the people, maybe we need to see a resume or portfolio or something. Get more information about the person.
You know, I think we can.
Other than what they just write, because a lot of things can be hidden, a lot of things can be embellished. And, you know, we rarely pick something without having all the details, knowing as much as we can.
So we can welcome Ms. Scott as she was selected, and then I'm happy to work with a team or a subcommittee to talk about the process and how we can make it better. But thank you for voting Ms. Scott on to serve.
We have a good thing going here. I think we could improve it. I think we can make the process a little refined and maybe give. I don't know. We have to get feedback from Kayla. See how we can improve the position to maybe put a little bit more bite into it, to bring more out to us. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, I want to hear your opinion. I want to know about what you're thinking about what's going on in places that we can't get to and understand. And that's part of what we were looking for. And if we're not accomplishing that, it would be nice to know through your eyes how we can do that better.
Do you mean like improving the application process specifically or the position?
And the job as well. As you look back on your tenure between just right now and when you started, what can we do to make it better for you? What can we do to make the position more of a resource for the board, where we can refine it and make it better? Bring more out, give us more information.
I think kind of demanding, because I'm also, again, a very shy person. So especially in the beginning, I spoke mostly when people asked me to. So I think finding ways to demand more information instead of allowing it to be optional, because on the off chance that we do get another shy representative, maybe having them, I couldn't say for sure right now, but just probably ways to kind of drag the opinions out. As for the interview or for the application process, I really, really recommend having like one-on-one interviews, even if they're virtual, and just asking them about themselves and maybe some controversial topics or something to kind of see how they conduct themselves. I feel like that would be really beneficial.
Can we do recommendations, like if they have one or two people that would submit recommendations?
Yeah. I mean, we can think through the process and bring it back to the table, and the board can consider and approve the process, moving forward. That could be some work that we could do this spring if you wish.
Because I think that might be another way that we could get to know who that person is without knowing the name. Is having.
I don't want to know. I don't want to see the face of the person as much as I want to know about the person.
Yeah.
And if we can get 2 or 3 recommendations from teachers or community people, doesn't have to be a teacher, it might help.
Yeah, because I liked your idea about the interview process or such, but we try to keep it anonymous. And so I'm like wondering if, kind of having a recommendation.
That's another idea, because whenever I think about it, I actually was very biased towards one of the applicants, and now that you say that, I actually think that would have been easier to get. So I actually, never mind, I agree.
The other thing to think about too is when Kayla came on, it was before the pandemic. And so the the student representative was also going to participate in the honors dinners, the homecoming parade, and some of those other things. So that part of this position didn't even get fulfilled.
Yeah.
So we have to, so
There's a lot of the connection that was missed.
Yes.
Because of the pandemic.
A lot of the spotlight is not shined.
Right.
If you will. And I was just thinking, even with the recommendation, I mean, you still, whoever's doing the recommending can just put, speak to candidate A, candidate 1, versus giving a name. That way it's still,
right.
Still anonymous. You don't know who the person is.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of like what Kayla just said at the beginning. She kind of gave us some input on a certain candidate. We didn't know who it was, but yet that was enough to kind of say, man, and just that little bit, I'm sitting there thinking, I hope I chose the right one, just by what she said, So I think that input, even though they're not saying their name or, giving their identity, it's still very helpful for us. So it'd be
and one other thing is, I would like to suggest, maybe even from Janiyah and from yourself, is maybe putting together what you would recommend to that person on what to put into their writing that they provide. You did a very good job last year. I think you wrote 2.
I did. I was
obsessed with this position. So, probably, maybe even having you kind of write something that tells people, what to be descriptive about, because kids may not know where to start or how much information or not enough information, that kind of thing. So that might be an opportunity for you too, to, even give feedback to people that are writing that can be pushed out when we do the next one.
Something like that. That's just fun. I feel like that would also be really good for. I feel like part of it right now is schools are being pushed very hard with the virtual learning. And I think that part of it is not, I don't really know how to say it other than not wanting to think anymore for an essay because they don't know what to put. So I think that would be a really great thing.
I do want us to reflect back, even with the first group, there was opportunities with the essays that we got. across the board. We had a couple good ones, but overall there were still opportunities with the essays and the structure. So I think there's opportunities in general as far as using it as a learning experience, because if we are talking about preparing students for the next phase in life, whether that's learning how to write an essay, a basic letter, there are certain things that for me, as I'm looking at the essays, basic structure, sentence structure, those type of things I am hoping I would expect to see. And if not, we are partnering the students that are applying for this with an adult or a representative or peer that can assist them in that writing process. So I think we need to be, for me, I just need to be very transparent about what the quality of what's coming in. There's opportunity there.
And I remember the conversation last year around this topic, and you know, to being totally transparent, we didn't put as much focus on this process this year. I didn't put as much focus on this process as I perhaps should have. So in terms of implementing changes and making it different than what it was last year, it wasn't different than what it was last year. You know, the idea of coaching students through the essay process and all that, and the additional support, you know, we didn't get that together. But I think it's very good feedback.
I agree with you too, Lisa, because you think about, you know, students applying for scholarships, you know, and having to write essays. You know, so this would be a great help for those individuals.
And part of that is just learning to be able to tell their story. That's hard because even some adults have a challenge with telling their story. So how do I tell my story or sell myself or sell my elevator speech? You know, and it doesn't matter if the student is a CDF student or ABC student. That's the soft skill that we need to be teaching our students. That's a basic soft skill that we should be teaching our students.
I like how you said how to sell themselves, how to have that elevator, you know how to sell themselves. Because whether they're walking out of here and going to college or walking out of here and going to a job, they have to be able to have that skill. You are exactly right.
I will say, this application was the first time I had written an essay about myself to apply for anything. And college application season came and I was a little more prepared, but nothing. It is a life skill that everyone, at least at this age, I don't know if I'll get in the future, but I definitely did that practice. I think I wrote probably like 100 essays about myself, and I think if I would have gone into that without any practice, it would have been a very, very hard journey.
Has it been made clear to the candidates, time, requirements of this?
So the sit-down conversation that we've had, again, last year, when we started this process and when we were in person, I made my way around and visited as many of the classrooms to talk to kids in person. This year, you know, in the virtual environment.
That's why I asked, do they know what they're getting into?
Yeah, so I've not talked either in person or virtually to describe all the requirements. No.
Or is that something that when you reach out to the candidate, Jennifer, that you can do?
Yeah. Now, absolutely.
So if, and this is, I'm just curious, what if someone can't fulfill the requirement? Would there be another application process?
So, you know, that's the part of building the plane as we fly it. So then if that's the case, we'd bring it back to the board level and would be able to decide how the board would want to move ahead. My guess is the board might decide to go with candidate number 2, but the board could discuss that.
Okay. Great conversation. Thanks everybody for the feedback. And if you think of anything else, please share it with Dr. Kilbride or myself. All right, moving on to 3.07, we have Dr. LaChance with personnel recommendations.
Evening. I did do some quick checking, and there are 7 staff members who are certified for dual credit. That is a little bit gray, though. I just wanted to clarify. Project Lead the Way courses certify coursework, not teachers. So if students get 2 coursework completed in a strand in Project Lead the Way and score well enough on the end of course assessment, then they can get credit at Missouri S&T for a required freshman course in the engineering program. So they just assume if the teacher is certified to teach the course and the students do well in the course, they can get the credit. So there's a little bit of gray area in the career and technical ed programs. Sorry for being off topic. I just want to answer that question tonight if I could.
Thanks for sharing.
So I'm here to present items 1 through 16 for your approval, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
So just a comment, Mike. We caught on the first group where it has separations in the notes. It says we're now pursuing another opportunity. Is that just another way of saying they're looking for another job in another school district?
No, actually not in that case, looking for a position outside of their current field, actually.
So I was watching a program just the other day that said, talk about teacher retention and teachers leaving the teaching field. It was a very high percentage. So every time we see something like that, it's they're leaving teaching to go somewhere else and do something else?
Not every time, but in this case.
I think also, especially, teaching with the virus, with the pandemic, there are a number, it's up the turnover rate as well.
I move we approve recommendations 1 through 16 as presented.
Second. I'm sorry, we have one question.
Sure.
Is number 5 new to a new Brittner employee? Can I say? Is number 5 a new Brittner custodian?
A new Brittner employee, yes, but has worked with us through WFF.
Okay.
If that clarifies.
Yeah. Okay. I have a motion and a second. I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones?
Yes.
I will vote yes. And I'm just waiting on Ms. Greco and Ms. DeGarden. Ms. Greco is a yes. Ms. DeGarden is a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. LaChanty.
All right. Moving on to 3.08, we will go through our board member comments. Does anybody have anything they would like to share?
In just a few days, as we all know, we have a holiday on a Monday, Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. It's a historic event that we should look at every year, reflect on what things could have been and what things he did bring forth. The next day, we come back to school. For us, for the community, for our nation, that could be another historic event that we're going to look back and reflect on. Are they two equal? Of course not. One was monumental. The other one is just a bigger bump in our road. But for our kids to come back to our school, for our teachers that are standing at the doors waiting, it's all that important. We've had a lot of staff working a lot of hours, being nervous, being anxious, being stressed. naming a motion. I'm sure they've gone through it. But I cheer for the home team every time. And I look forward to Tuesday morning.
Yes. Thank you. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share? I have a couple of things. I wanted to let you know, I'm going to let you know about the evaluations. Okay. So evaluations need to be done. With the pandemic, we've lost sight of that. So I will be, not me. Doug will be sending out both evaluations, the superintendent evaluation and the board evaluations. They'll be due on January 31st. At our February 4th meeting, we will have our board evaluation that we'll go through. And on February 11th, we'll have the superintendent meeting. Any questions? Okay.
Would you tell me again what that due date was?
January 31st. Thank you. It's a Sunday night. So then that way Doug can pull everything and get it out to everybody.
And for clarification, I've been working on, because I work with Doug on this, for clarification, we're using the same
Yes,
document as last time. You guys haven't made any edits or change work on.
that is correct.
Okay.
Same thing.
Thank
So
you.
everybody's going to have a lot more because we've missed our quarters.
Okay. All right.
We'll get back into the swing of it. The other thing I'd like to say is I wanted to send a huge thank you to everybody who donated for 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. We were able to get the 150 bags out to each of the schools, and it was not as much fun this year. It was me and my husband and my 2 kids and my mother-in-law filling the bags, and it took us a little bit longer, but it wasn't as fun because I didn't get to see everybody. And then delivering them, it was, we were dropping them at the door and people were taking them from the door. But that's just the fun part. But the big part is that it gets to the kids and the kids get to enjoy it. And I had a friend of mine call me and she said, I just saw one of the 'Twas the Night Before Christmas bags being delivered. And so she was very excited to be able to see. So anyway, thank you to everybody who donated. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. On December 26th, I went shopping. So already started for next year.
Very nice.
All right. If nobody has anything else, we'll move on to our consent agenda items. And I'll just look for a motion to approve them.
I make a motion to approve consent agenda items 4.01 through 4.04 as recommended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Dr. Alden.
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones.
Yes.
I will vote yes. And Ms. Greco and Mr. Gardner. Ms. Greco is a yes. Mr. Garden is a yes. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to 5.01.
I'd like to make the recommendation to reconvene in closed session for state statute 610021 for the purpose of a discussion of real estate and personnel agenda items.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Alvin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco? Or Ms. Glover Jones? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Going down the row there. I'll vote yes. And Ms. Greco and Mr. Garden? I have a yes from Ms. Greco